This was the most chaotic day for the Yan-Huang alliance since it had been unofficially established in the Mystic Moon world. The entire alliance was furiously searching for Peter Pan. Of course, they definitely wouldn't be able to communicate with Peter Pan, but his reject all communication status showed that he had been logged on for the entire time. As for the one who caused all of this chaos, he was taking a stroll with his little sister. The speed at which Shura recovered was extremely astonishing. She seemed noticeably better every day. Even after they walked for an hour, she did not say she was tired at all. Right now, she was almost as healthy as a normal person. After suffering from the disease for 3 years, the rate at which she recovered was incomprehensible. Back then, the doctor had said that because of the 13,223 drug, not only would she quickly recover, but also would pretty much never get sick again. Right now, they could see that this was quite true. The authorities in the medicine world had predicted that within 10 years, the Isrock disease would be completely eradicated. This represented boundless hope. Big brother, do you really have deep enmity with that Long Tian Yun? I've never heard Big brother mention it before. As they walked hand in hand, Shura was pressed closely to Ling Chen as she walked in step with him. All those years, to be able to walk like this with him was her greatest desire. And now, like a dream, her wish had been fulfilled. To be able to live healthily with Ling Chen, and not be a burden to him, every second was heaven to her. Although, that's all in the distant past. Ling Chen spoke with a slight smile as he continued to look forwards. He had never told Shura about the things that had happened before they had met. This was because he didn't want to tell the pure, angelic Shura about the dark things of his past. He casually said, "Before I met Shura, I didn't have a home, because my home was destroyed by him." Shura cried out in surprise as she looked at him. Ling Chen laughed, and squeezed her little hand. "I said it's all in the distant past. Plus, I should be thanking him if it wasn't for him, would never have met my Rua. Although I lost my home because of him, but I gained an even warmer and more loving home, because in this home, is Rua, who will never leave me." Shura's worry quickly became a cheerful smile. She stopped walking and hugged Ling Chen from the front. "Big brother, no matter what happens, I will never, ever leave you." In the 3 years that Shura had suffered from the Isrock disease, Ling Chen had put down everything, including the hatred he held in his heart. However, with Shura's recovery, as well as hearing about Long Tian Yun once again, the dormant hatred within him once again rose up. Before, he was by himself, and did not have anything to consider. However now, he had something to think about, to take into consideration, which was Shura. "Let's go and do some shopping. We've earned so much money today, so we should go buy some pretty clothes for Rua. I want to buy heaps of pretty clothes for Big brother to look at me in. To be honest, no matter what Rua wears, she always looks perfect. That's for sure." After having an afternoon of fun, they returned home as it grew dark. Evidently, Ling Chen did not seem worried about the battle the next day at all. For dinner, Ling Chen and Shura cooked together. When eating, they would especially eat the dishes the other person made, and when their chopsticks touched together, they would look at each other and start laughing. At night, within the Mystic Moon world. Because this time he couldn't be directly transported there, Ling Chen only arrived at the Forest of Bones near midnight. By now, there was not a single player around. After the Forest of Bones quest had been closed, people were no longer interested in the Forest of Bones. After all, the monsters there all had ridiculously high defense, and did not drop any money, and very rarely dropped any equipment. Having come to the Forest of Bones before, Ling Chen was not as overly cautious as he had been the first time. He called out his newly bought cloud-stepping mare, and mounted it, with more than 100 million gold. Spending 20,000 gold coins to buy a cloud-stepping mare was not that big of a deal anymore. Slotting the jadeite jade into the lunar scourge, Ling Chen was no longer afraid of the movement speed debuff that the semi-spirit girl cast. As for the Warring Palace skeleton and its extremely high defense, none of that mattered to Ling Chen anymore. After all, even if its defense was 10 times greater, it would still be like clouds before the cancer orb. Little Master, do you really hate that person called Long Tianyun? Just as Ling Chen was about to advance, Qi Yu's voice appeared in his mind. Ling Chen, before, when you were speaking with him, I could sense the change in your heartbeat. It was the first time I sensed such a strong reaction within Little Master. Qi Yu softly laughed, plus, Little Master's actions today revealed to me Little Master's vicious side. Qi Yu knew all about what Ling Chen had done. Stealing Long Tianyun's 1 billion gold coins, humiliating him in front of the whole world, destroying the Yan-Huang Alliance's dream of becoming the first official guild, and to top it off, Long Tianyun didn't even know who was behind it all. This was indeed worse than even physically torturing and killing Long Tianyun. Qi Yu was always with him, and it was the first time she had seen him do such a thing. Vicious? Ha ha, Ling Chen began to laugh out loud. You say I'm vicious? No, you're wrong, what I did to him could even be said to be too kind. It's a pity that right now I don't have enough power to go against the Yan-Huang Alliance or the Long family, so I can only use these kind little methods. He entered the forest of bones on the cloud-stepping mare, and with Xiao Hui taking the lead, headed directly to the heart of the forest. Ling Chen's derisive laugh caused Qi Yu to quieten down. After a long time, she asked, it seems that Little Master hates Long Tianyun to the bones, can you tell me why this is? Perhaps I can help you. I don't need anyone to interfere with my affairs, and you won't be able to help me anyways. As for what happened between me and him, Ling Chen stopped speaking momentarily, then continued, when I was very young, we lived in the same place. He was the honorable son of the Long family, whereas I was just a poor servant who was often bullied. Afterwards, I mysteriously contracted a deadly disease, and was ostracized by everyone. Finally, to prevent me from infecting anyone else, I was taken to a place 100 kilometers away, and buried alive. Qi Yu. It's a pity that the heavens didn't let me die that day. Instead, I was taken to a place, heaven, that was even scarier than death itself. Perhaps it should be called hell. I didn't want to die, I wanted revenge. As such, I managed to survive, and after I escaped from there, I returned to the place I was born. Speaking to there, Ling Chen stopped talking, and maneuvered the cloud-stepping mare to avoid some obstacles, and then advanced at full speed. Ling Chen had said very little, but how complicated the events actually were, as well as how much he truly hated Long Tianyun, only he himself knew. After a long period of silence, Qi Yu started to speak again. From the beginning, I always wondered why the lunar scourge was not able to take away your consciousness, as well as why you were able to accept this item of utmost hatred so easily. Moreover, even after knowing the consequences of the Moon God clan finding out that you had the lunar scourge and its exclusive orbs, you still accepted it, and even actively went to find them. So it seems that you want to rely on the lunar scourge's power. That's right, Ling Chen said, you said that if I can find all of the exclusive orbs of the lunar scourge, I can even challenge gods. At that time, it should be no problem to single-handedly destroy a large guild or alliance. So it was like that. I thought that Little Master was doing it for me, and you, haven't you been using me this entire time? Ling Chen asked expressionlessly. Qi Yu, Tao Tai said that you're someone with a high status and great intelligence. Would this sort of person call someone without any status or power Little Master? After spending this period of time together, you know pretty much everything about me, whereas I know practically nothing about you. Every time I ask you something about yourself, you always try to change the topic. Aren't you just using me for your own purposes? Little Master doesn't have to be so serious. Qi Yu gave a soft laugh. You conquered the lunar scourge and became the master of the lunar scourge, so of course you're my master as well. And me using you, that's not entirely false. After all, if Little Master can find all of the exclusive orbs and recover the Lunar Scourge's original power, I can finally have a complete body. Was it really like that? Ling Chen didn't know for sure, but his instincts told him that it definitely wasn't as simple as that. I will do my best to recover the Lunar Scourge's power as quickly as possible. Although I don't know your aim, but I need the Lunar Scourge's power. Although this power is virtual, but I can use it to do many things in this virtual world. Soon, Ling Chen had crossed half of the first district of the Forest of Bones. Perhaps it was because the Warring Palace skeleton had fallen to celestial grade, but there were significantly less skeletons in the Forest of Bones. Occasionally a few would appear, but it was incredibly easy for Ling Chen to outrun them. Virtual power, Qiyu gave a mysterious smile. 1 hour later. Upon reaching the final district, the skeleton army did not appear again. Without facing any resistance, Ling Chen entered the heart of the forest. The eerie castle had long been destroyed, and in the distance, he saw a gigantic skeleton. It was the Warring Palace skeleton. Good. Holding both weapons in his hands, Ling Chen slowed down his pace, and drew nearer and nearer towards the enormous skeleton. Shi Ling, I will avenge you. If Shi Ling was here, it would only take her 3 red lasers to destroy it. However, Shi Ling could not even come out, much less battle. Despite this, it would still be no problem for Ling Chen to kill it. As he charged, the distance between them shrank. In just a few seconds, he had entered the boundary of the eerie castle. He remembered that back then, the Warring Palace skeleton had only woken up because they had attacked the semi-spirit girl. That meant that as long as Ling Chen didn't attack the Warring Palace skeleton, it would not take the initiative to attack him first. As such, he approached without any caution. Soul sacrifice. Battle soul possession. Ling Chen had no way to resist the semi-spirit girl's ability to lock his skills, so he activated his 2 strongest skills before coming close. When he was about 10 meters away from the Warring Palace skeleton, he jumped off the cloud-stepping mare, and simultaneously called it back. He released a Ling Tian burst with his left hand, and a 4-corner star formation with his right hand towards the Warring Palace skeleton. From the beginning, he began to use his strongest attacks. If he didn't use them now, he might not have a chance later on when the semi-spirit girl began to use her skills. Moreover, against this LV-20 celestial boss, having 1 HP or max HP was the same. 1 hit from the Warring Palace skeleton was enough to immediately kill him. 3104629568. Bang! Bam! Minus 31,046, 568. A purple damage figure and a blue damage figure appeared above the enormous skeleton. The purple damage figure signified a critical hit and pierce, whereas the blue signified a pierce. These 2 attacks had not been affected by the Warring Palace skeleton's defense at all. Having the Cancer Orb, all of Ling Chen's attacks in future would either be blue or purple, and never be simply red or yellow. His attacks would always at least have pierce, and occasionally have critical hits. Rumble. Having taken 2 attacks, the dormant Warring Palace skeleton was awoken, and the ground trembled as it stood up. The gigantic skeletal sword also appeared in its hand. At the same time, a deep voice sounded out. Who has once again disturbed my sleep? Shut the hell up. The first time he had heard this voice, it had made him feel quite apprehensive. This giant skeleton's voice released an oppressive and dominating force. However, the skeleton just seemed like a massive idiot to him now. Standing up took a whole 3 seconds, and shouting out took another 5 seconds. In this period of time, Ling Chen attacked it again and again. 7 7667 761 7 72915 501 7 75015 542. Under the effects of soul sacrifice, Ling Chen's attack power was simply monstrous. Before, with the battle soul possession, his 2 attacks had cleared off more than 60,000 of the Warring Palace skeleton's HP. Now, after 3 rounds of double Ling Tian bursts, the Warring Palace skeleton's 250,000 HP had fallen to less than half, and a faint grey light arose from its body. At this moment, Ling Chen stopped attacking, and quickly retreated to 30 meters away. When he looked back at the Warring Palace skeleton, it had already entered its battle mode. On its right hand, Ling Chen saw the semi-spirit girl with her jet black eyes and black dress. The girl was still holding her extremely old rabbit doll. Ling Chen's opponent wasn't just the Warring Palace skeleton, but also this girl as well, who was his biggest obstacle to defeating the gigantic skeleton. The Warring Palace skeleton's key strengths were in its attack power and defense. Its defense was especially high, to the point that it made people want to despair. With Ling Chen's base attack power, without soul sacrifice or the cancer orb, he definitely would not be able to break through it. However, its movement speed was incredibly low, and every time after it attacked it would pause for quite a few seconds before it attacked again. It also didn't have a very big variety of attacks, apart from its ultimate skill that it could only use once per day. Its only other skill that could cause damage was the earth-splitting slash. Without its massive defense, to Ling Chen, this celestial boss was not much of a challenge anymore. The only thing stopping him from easily killing it was its baleful shield and the semi-spirit girl. Having its HP reduced to 50%, the Warring Palace skeleton's baleful shield, which reflected 10% of physical damage, automatically activated. Ling Chen, in his condition with soul sacrifice activated, definitely couldn't afford to attack it, otherwise the reflection of his own damage would instantly kill him. He once again called out the cloud-stepping mare, and quickly retreated. Behind him, the Warring Palace skeleton also began to move, and just one step closed in the distance between them by 1/3. Even if I die, I will not let you hurt the one I am protecting. Although it had gone down to celestial grade, the Warring Palace skeleton's voice was still ear-splitting. While Ling Chen calculated his timing, he looked back at the Warring Palace skeleton. The giant skeleton's undying will came from its desire to protect something. Was the thing it was protecting the bodiless semi-spirit girl? Finally, the soul sacrifice's effects ended. Ling Chen immediately restored his HP with a potion, then turned around and charged at the Warring Palace skeleton. Today you will definitely die. Because of Shi Ling, this was the first time he had harbored such hatred towards a monster. As he entered the Warring Palace skeleton's attacking range, the Warring Palace skeleton stopped walking, and raised its gigantic sword, then swung it down at Ling Chen. Boom! The ground had been split, and dust floated everywhere. It was evident that if this attack had hit him, Ling Chen would undoubtedly be dead. However, its actions had been too obvious. Back when it had been Heaven's End grade, Ling Chen was able to predict where it would hit, but could not escape its terrifying AoE in time. However, the radius of the celestial grade Warring Palace skeleton's earth-splitting slash had been significantly reduced. While on the cloud-stepping mare, Ling Chen's maximum movement speed was 206, which made it incredibly easy to dodge. Within the earth-shattering sounds, Ling Chen easily escaped from the Warring Palace skeleton's AoE, and rushed to its feet, simultaneously sending out 2 Ling Tian bursts. 19403878-194388. 2 Ling Tian bursts took away about 5,000 of the Warring Palace skeleton's HP, but his own HP had also fallen by about half. At the same time, 2 rays of black light silently appeared and wrapped around his body. Ding! You have been restricted by the darkness lock. Your attack speed, jumping ability and evasion have been lowered by 30% for 30 seconds, no effect on your hit rate or movement speed. Ding! You have been restricted by the underworld lock. You cannot use any active skills for 30 seconds. Ling Chen raised his head. Hovering 20 meters above the ground, the girl in black's 2 hands were glowing with a dark light. The jadeite jade proved its worth, as the darkness lock did not reduce his movement speed. As for the reduction to his attack speed, evasion and jumping ability, he didn't mind too much. Not being able to use skills temporarily also was not a big deal. Before the Warring Palace skeleton could attack again, he used his normal attacks to hit it. 924930. 9293. After attacking 4 times and suffering the recoil 4 times, Ling Chen's HP had dropped to a dangerous state. He temporarily stopped attacking, and prepared to use a potion to recover his lost HP. Suddenly, his sense of danger alerted him of something above him. By the time he looked up, a darkness spike was only half a meter away from him. Before, the first time he had been attacked by this darkness spike, his movement speed had been reduced. Moreover, it was so unexpected that he did not have time to defend himself. However, this time, he definitely would not be hit so easily by it. Without much thought, Ling Chen twisted his body and quickly dismounted from the cloud-stepping mare, narrowly avoiding the darkness spike descending from above. The darkness spike instead landed on the cloud-stepping mare, nearly instantly killing it. Ling Chen landed on the ground, and slightly frowned. After quickly pondering for half a second, he recalled the cloud-stepping mare. To him, the darkness spike was an incredibly fearsome skill because it was completely silent, and undetectable through any senses other than sight. Ling Chen was only able to detect it through his danger sense, which had been developed after many life-and-death battles. After receiving so much damage from the baleful shield, he knew that if he was hit by the darkness spike, he would definitely die. As such, he unhesitatingly abandoned his mount, although sitting on his mount increased his movement speed, but it also reduced his own agility. Even without the cloud-stepping mare, he could effectively avoid the Warring Palace skeleton's attacks. The best method for avoiding the darkness spike was to quickly dodge once the spike had been shot out. Because the darkness spike flew at a set trajectory, as opposed to being locked onto its target, it would be easy to dodge it once it had begun moving. As such, after Ling Chen recovered his HP, he took a deep breath, and used his fastest speed to run towards the Warring Palace skeleton's body. Another earth-splitting slash landed, and Ling Chen easily evaded it again. Like a bolt of lightning, he once again charged to its feet, and circled around them while attacking, causing the semi-spirit girl's darkness spikes to miss. Ling Chen was right about the darkness spikes. Although they were very difficult to detect, they required a period of time to form, and could only fly forwards in a single trajectory. 924930186291. The Warring Palace skeleton's HP fell yet again, and after attacking 6 times, Ling Chen distanced himself from it again. He did not dare to be greedy and attack it more times than was prudent. After all, a single mistake could result in him dying. If everything went well, it would only take another 20 rounds of this strategy to kill the skeleton. Fall with me into bleak hell. Boom. 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 The Warring Palace skeleton's booming voice once again sounded out, but was not able to distract Ling Chen in the slightest. Right now, he had fully immersed himself in the battle. His spirit and mind were completely concentrated, and he consistently dodged the Warring Palace skeleton and the semi-spirit girl's attacks. In the gap of a few seconds between the Warring Palace skeleton's attacks, he once again unleashed a round of 6 attacks. From the beginning, he had not been hit even once, and all of the damage he had taken was only from the reflection of damage. Back then, the giant greedy toad had not been able to hit him even once throughout the course of their 9-hour battle. Although this skeleton was physically massive, it definitely wouldn't be able to hit him either. Ling Chen hit it again and again with his normal attacks, occasionally using potions to replenish his HP. With his absolute hit and absolute pierce, as well as occasional critical hits, even normal attacks did an incredible amount of damage. After 10 rounds of 6 attacks, the Warring Palace skeleton's HP had been depleted to only 50,000 or so. Good, let's continue like this. Although every single one of its attacks had missed, the Warring Palace skeleton continued to take time to lock onto Ling Chen's position. After all, it only had a bit of its will, not intelligence or battle sense, left. After the 10th time Ling Chen retreated from it, it did not raise its sword, but instead raised its right foot then stomped down. Ling Chen couldn't help but laugh. He focused on the skeleton's right foot, and the instant it hit the ground, he jumped. Boom! This was the Warring Palace skeleton's earth-shaking stomp. If he was hit by tremors, he would be stunned, which would definitely result in him being hit afterwards. However, although Ling Chen wasn't able to escape outside the massive AoE of the earth-shaking stomp, the information that Xiao Hui had transmitted to him told him that it only affected enemies on the ground. As such, if he could grasp the timing, he would be able to avoid the tremors. As a massive boom sounded out, the ground shook violently. Under the semi-spirit girl's darkness lock, his jumping ability had been reduced, but it was still enough to avoid the tremors. After jumping in the air for about 1 second, he landed on the ground. Some residual tremors caused his body to sway, but he did not become stunned. Ling Chen grinned, and charged up, his soaring cloud and zephyr blade relentlessly striking the Warring Palace skeleton's foot. -9301862921185892392. The earth-splitting slash posed no danger to him, and the earth-shaking stomp was easily avoidable. As long as he was able to dodge the darkness spikes, he would have no problems defeating this giant skeleton. Yet another round of attacks wiped out another 7,000 HP, after which Ling Chen retreated and replenished his HP, waiting for the skeleton's next attack. As he carried out these attacks again and again, the Warring Palace skeletons continuously decreased, from 20% to 15% to 10%. 15650/250000 -1848925919926. The darkness lock that had been restricting Ling Chen expired, but this change went unnoticed by Ling Chen. After yet another round of attacks, the Warring Palace skeleton's HP fell to below 20,000, 15650/250000. Ling Chen slightly gritted his teeth. In just 2 to 3 rounds of attacks, he would be able to finish off this skeleton. At this moment, a cry of fury sounded out from the Warring Palace skeleton. It stopped moving, and raised its huge sword high above its head. A mass of gray light appeared over its body. Ling Chen stopped retreating. When its HP fell to 10% or below, the giant skeleton would release its ultimate skill, thundering heavens and shaking earth. However, facing its final, and strongest, skill, Ling Chen began to laugh. Not only did he stop retreating, but instead ran towards it. If it was the Heaven's End grade Warring Palace skeleton using this skill, Ling Chen definitely would not have done such a thing. However, after becoming Celestial grade, this skill became pretty much useless, not because of its attack power, but because it had to charge up for 10 seconds. With its current HP, 10 seconds was entirely enough to finish it off. However, just when Ling Chen had reached the Warring Palace skeleton's feet, and was about to attack, he sensed something, and looked up. The semi-spirit girl had floated down from the Warring Palace skeleton's hand, and was only 5 meters away. This girl, who didn't have a physical body, did not fear physical attacks. He became alert as the girl drifted closer to him, and watched her actions closely as he furrowed his brows. At this moment, the girl's eyes suddenly shone with a dark glow. Ling Chen's eyes were forcefully compelled by some unknown force to look at her in the eyes. At the same time, information from Xiao Hui was transmitted to him. Eternal Eyes of Darkness, Forbidden Spirit skill, uses one's own darkness energy to bind the target's soul. Once successful, the target's soul will be temporarily frozen, and will enter into a soulless state. The soulless state will persist for 10 plus x seconds, x equals own level, target's level, negative numbers will be counted as 0. If unsuccessful, the user will instead suffer from the effects. The rate of success is dependent on the strength of the user's and target's spirit respectively. An icy feeling spread throughout Ling Chen's body, causing his entire body to feel slightly numb. At the same time, a gust of wind seemed to be dragging something out of his body. This sort of terrifying feeling went on for about 1 second, when Ling Chen let out a low shout and tore his gaze away from the girl's eyes. The young girl's body went stiff, and the dark glow in her eyes dissipated. She stood in the air, as if frozen. She never expected that not only did this forbidden skill not work on this human, but after only 1 second, it was reflected back at her, causing her to lose her consciousness. The icy feeling disappeared from his body, and immediately, Ling Chen sprinted towards the warring palace skeleton that was still charging up its ultimate attack. -9309258925919961850 -93931859392931855. The warring palace skeleton and Ling Chen's HP simultaneously fell. However, after a few seconds, Ling Chen's HP was recovered, whereas the warring palace skeleton's HP continued to fall to 10,000, then 5,000, then 3,000. That semi-spirit girl continued to hover there in the air, as if frozen by ice. Even the lunar scourge was unable to take over his consciousness, and was conquered by him, yet a semi-spirit actually tried to attack his spirit? Qiyu mockingly muttered. The Eyes of Eternal Darkness was a fearsome darkness skill, which could not be used by many. This skill told Qiyu that the semi-spirit girl's background was definitely not ordinary, but she had chosen the wrong person to use it on, and she had been the one to suffer the consequences. -18489259199926. You can go die now. Seeing that the warring palace skeleton had almost finished charging its ultimate attack, Ling Chen yelled out in a cold voice, and stabbed the soaring cloud into its foot. -930. With that final stab, the warring palace skeleton's final shred of HP had been extinguished, and the grey light of its ultimate skill that had almost finished charging disappeared. Even if I die, I will not let you hurt. The skeleton's deep, booming voice was cut off, and its gigantic body fell to the ground with a crash. Ding! You have killed the LV-20 Celestial Grade Boss Undying Will, Warring Palace Skeleton. You received Fame plus 2000, SP plus 2000. Ding! Your pet, Holy Spirit Beast, has leveled up to LV-18. The darkness aura, around the gigantic 30-meter or so long skeleton, began to dissipate, and Ling Chen could no longer feel the oppressive aura from its body. The warring palace skeleton was now just a mass of gigantic bones, and would never rise again. Cancer Orb and the Jadeite Jade. In just 2 days, he had found the 2 things that he needed the most, which allowed him to easily kill the gigantic skeleton even without Shi Ling's help. Ling Chen let out a long sigh, and closed his eyes, silently saying in his mind, Shi Ling, I've taken revenge for you. Now, no matter how small the chances are, I will go to the south to find the guardian beast Vermilion Bird of the Legends. When celestial bosses died, they were bound to drop exquisite items, and Ling Chen was sure that the warring palace skeleton was no exception. However, Ling Chen did not immediately go to the warring palace skeleton's bones to look for items, but rather turned his gaze to the semi-spirit girl floating in the air. The semi-spirit girl had recovered from the effects of the Eyes of Eternal Darkness, and the first thing she had seen was the fallen warring palace skeleton. Her illusory body floated down to the gigantic skeleton, and landed on its chest. As she floated down, Ling Chen could clearly see tear drops rolling down from her cheeks. Don't die, standing on the giant skeleton, the young girl cried and howled. Her pitiful wailing was enough to make anyone feel sorry for her. Ling Chen gave a slight sigh and turned around. He did not know of this girl's background, and having only half a spirit, maybe she didn't even know either. Her mentality was somewhat similar to that of a 3-year-old child's, and she had stayed here with that giant skeleton day after day, year after year. All these years, the giant skeleton had been her only companion, her only support, and even her only family. Now, it had died, and the shock it caused to her was tremendous, despite the fact that she only had half a spirit. From now on, she would have to reside in solitariness in this forest of bones. The only thing that would accompany her would be the lifeless rabbit doll held in her arms. The skeleton only had a last bit of its will, which was to protect the young girl at all costs. To them, Ling Chen was the vicious evildoer. Ling Chen stood there in a daze for a while, listening to the young girl's cries. Finally, he shook his head, and looked away from the girl, and prepared to collect the items the warring palace skeleton had dropped. As soon as he moved, the crying semi-spirit girl reacted like a scared rabbit, and shot up into the air. She looked at him, her eyes filled with fear. Ling Chen, this girl did not fear physical attacks, and Ling Chen did not have any magic attacks, so it was impossible for him to harm her. Her fear of him was completely unnecessary. However, it seemed that she did not know this. The skeleton that had just fallen was probably like a guardian or a father to her, so she probably harbored some fear and hatred towards Ling Chen. Ling Chen decided not to look at her, and started looking around the skeleton for items. Suddenly, he saw the girl's body become semi-transparent, then opaque again. Very soon, Ling Chen found that what he had just saw was not an illusion. After a few seconds, the semi-spirit girl's body once again became semi-transparent, which allowed Ling Chen to even see the scenery behind her. Ling Chen looked at her in shock. She would become semi-transparent every 2 seconds or so, and it seemed to become more frequent. Then, at a certain point, would her body just disappear? After the giant skeleton died, her soul sacrifice contract with it was terminated. The illusory body she created from the contract will also disappear soon. Then, this girl will become a true semi-spirit, a wandering soul. Chi Yu slowly said, her voice tinted with a hint of sympathy. Compared to this poor girl, she was far better off. Ling Chen sighed, back then, when I completed the quest, I shouldn't have come here. Because of him, the semi-spirit girl had lost everything. However, many people had also lost their lives because of her. Moreover, even more people in future could have died because of her. Although he potentially saved many people, Ling Chen still felt guilty about what he had done to this girl. Screw it, what's the point of thinking so much? Ling Chen stopped looking at her, and walked towards the warring palace skeleton's body. Little master, quickly leave. Leave immediately. Just as Ling Chen was about to pick up his first spoils of war, Chi Yu's voice sounded out in his head. He did not hesitate, and immediately quickly ran away, while asking, "What's wrong?" Chi Yu replied, "The skeleton died, but the girl did not die. That means that the soul sacrifice contract that the girl used on the skeleton was her first one. Because she can use it twice in her life, after the first contractee dies, the contract between them will vanish, and she is free to use it on another being. Her illusory body is about to vanish, so she needs to find another being to use the contract on. The only being here that she can use the contract on is you. Ling Chen. If he was contracted by the soul sacrifice contract, all damage taken by the girl would be transferred to him. This definitely wasn't a good thing. If this happened, he would never be able to relax ever again. Although she was immune to physical attacks, there were many magician profession players in the Mystic Moon world. As such, Ling Chen's speed increased to the max, and temporarily gave up on picking up the items from the warring palace skeleton. After all, the items dropped from a celestial boss would never disappear. Not good, it's too late. Chi Yu said in a despondent voice. What do you mean by, too late? Just as Ling Chen finished speaking, a dark light shot down from the sky and landed on his head. At that moment, a strange and unique feeling passed through his heart, which then immediately disappeared. A system announcement then rang out, almost causing Ling Chen to jump in shock. Ding, you have been forced to undertake a soul sacrifice contract by, all of the damage taken by, will be transferred to you, until you die. Ding, because of your status as a player, the soul sacrifice contract between you and, has recognized, as your humanoid pet. All of her damage will be transferred to you, and her level will always be equivalent yours. None of your EXP will be split with her. Unless you truly die, there is no way to terminate the contract. Please name your new pet. Ling Chen stopped walking, and his expression was one of extreme confusion. He turned around, and looked at the semi-spirit floating in the air. He didn't know if he should cry, or if he should cry. Well, I guess this was unavoidable. Soul sacrifice contracts are usually forced upon the contractee. Not only you, but even if a moon goddess came, they would be unable to resist either. That's why back then there were so many people desperately looking for ways to attain the soul sacrifice contract method. Chi Yu explained. The girl's arms were crossed in front of her chest, and looked at him darkly with a sense of fear. She was afraid that Ling Chen would harm her, but was also afraid that her body would disappear. As such, she unhesitatingly used her second soul sacrifice contract on Ling Chen. This girl had not matured yet, and did not think much of the consequences of her actions. A layer of cold sweat appeared on Ling Chen's forehead. From now on, the damage taken by this girl would all be transferred to him. He was a player, so he could revive, but every time he died his level would be reset to 0. This contract, which he had thought was pretty ridiculous the first time Chi Yu had mentioned it, had actually been used on him, and it was a contract that could not be rejected or terminated. Goddamit! What sort of damn contract is this? If there were even more people who could use this contract, wouldn't the entire world fall into chaos? Ling Chen howled. Little master, do you really think that there are many people that can use this sort of terrifying contract? Although there have been many stories about this contract, it has only been seen once. Legends say that there are only 2 types of beings that can use this sort of contract. One of them are beings with godhood. Godhood? You mean like a moon goddess? Ling Chen asked. Moon goddess? Although moon gods and goddesses are called gods, in essence they're just humans with special powers and supernatural strength. As for godhood, it completely surpasses the human level, and can dominate anything in the mystic moon world. Perhaps the only being that touched the boundaries of godhood was the Shura from 10,000 years ago. However, this girl can't possibly have any godhood. Otherwise, she would be able to completely destroy Little Master with just a flick of her finger. Chi Yu said while smiling. And the other type? The other type are beings with incredibly strong spirit. Legends say that the person who used the soul sacrifice contract had a terrifying, unparalleled spirit power. However, this semi-spirit girl only has half a spirit, and evidently has weaker spirit than you, so she's not this type either. Little Master doesn't have to think too much. These 2 sayings are only legends after all, no one knows if they're true or not. However, this girl being able to use the soul sacrifice contract makes even me feel shocked. Her background definitely isn't simple. If you enjoy reading Shura's Wrath, please consider clicking the ADF.ly buttons. If all of our readers clicked just one ADF.ly button every day, there would be at least 1 bonus chapter every week. There's nothing you can do now. The only thing you can do is to take her with you wherever you go, and protect her properly. You need to make her trust you and follow you, otherwise you'll never be able to sleep in peace again. As long as she isn't attacked by a magician, you'll be fine. Chi Yu casually said. Ling Chen scratched his head, and could only sigh, all right, I guess that's all I can do. Indeed, that was his only option. Otherwise, he would have to forever leave the mystic moon world as he simply wouldn't be able to play anymore. Why did such a damnable thing exist in this virtual world? Ding, please name your new pet. The system announcement once again reminded him. Ling Chen came back to his senses, and looked at the girl floating in her air. Unless she truly had to, she probably didn't want to use her last soul sacrifice contract on him either. Her eyes were pitch black, but Ling Chen could see fear, hatred and coldness in those eyes. Humanoid pet, to see a girl as a pet, that was quite weird to Ling Chen. However, since the system had set her as his pet, he could do nothing about it. He had hoped that since she was a pet, she would be as obedient and listening as Xiao Hui and Shi Ling, but evidently this was not going to be possible. It was quite obvious that although humanoid pets were still pets, but she was completely different to Xiao Hui and Shi Ling. What's your name? This was the first thing that Ling Chen had said to the girl. Ding, you have successfully named your pet Leng'Er. The girl also received the system announcement, and her dark eyes slightly quivered. Ling Chen did not try to go near her, so as to not scare her, and instead gave a smile and said, I don't know if you still remember your name, so if you don't have a name right now, I'll just call you Leng'Er. The girl didn't answer him, and instead continued to stare at him. Your companion has already died, so from today onwards, just follow me and I'll protect you. Our lives are already tied together, so I will definitely protect you and not let you come to any harm. Plus, I'll take you to the outside world. As Ling Chen talked, he looked at her eyes, seeing if there was any reaction. In his last sentence, he used the ace in his hand. In the outside world, it's very warm and beautiful, and there are also lots and lots of cute and pretty dolls. As he spoke the last sentence, he saw some color in the eyes of the semi-spirit girl. In this place, there was only the giant skeleton and her doll. In such an environment, her adoration of dolls became simply creepy. As soon as she heard the word doll, she forgot all about the fear she felt towards Ling Chen, and her lips began to move. Lots, and lots, of cute dolls. Little kids were truly easy to cheer up and please. It seemed that dolls were the ultimate tools to gaining the trust of this girl. Ling Chen took out one of the dolls he had bought from the Azure Dragon City toy store. It was a large, brown bear. He raised it in front of him. Look, Leng'Er. This doll was brand new, and was much larger than the rabbit doll that Leng'Er carried around. As he took out the bear doll, he clearly saw Leng'Er's eyes flash, and her attention focused on the bear doll. It was a gaze of extreme adoration and desire. Doll, cute, doll. Leng'Er's gaze was like that of a little child looking at a piece of delicious candy. With this sort of temperament, it probably wouldn't be too hard to get her to stop being fearful of him, which caused Ling Chen to feel relieved. This girl obviously had not seen much of the outside world, and this doll was probably the prettiest she had ever seen. She definitely wanted it badly. Ling Chen brought the doll closer to Leng'Er, and asked her, Leng'Er, this doll is really pretty, right? Do you want me to give it to you? Here, come and hug it. Immediately, Leng'Er's adoration for the doll immediately was also transferred over to Ling Chen. Just a few seconds ago, she had been incredibly fearful and hateful of him, but now, with just a doll and a few sentences, Leng'Er began to voluntarily float over. Although she floated slowly, it was obvious that for the doll, she was willing to overcome her fear of Ling Chen. Finally, she landed in front of Ling Chen and reached out with her slender arms to hug the bear doll. Of course, Ling Chen wouldn't be so stupid as to scare her at this critical moment. He gently released the doll into her embrace. At the same time, he looked at her carefully for the first time. Her features looked flawless, and Ling Chen could not find any blemish on her. Her face was also extremely beautiful, to the point that it could be described as enchanting. This sort of girl, as well as Chiyu, that sort of woman, could only appear in a virtual game like this. Ling Chen momentarily zoned out while looking at her, and suddenly came back to his senses. He realized, seeing as she liked dolls so much, if someone else tried to use dolls to tempt her, it seemed that this would have to be kept a secret. Leng'Er tightly hugged the big brown bear doll, and buried her face into its soft fur. She seemed incredibly happy and content. Ding, your pet Leng'Er's favorability towards you +10. Eh? Favorability? What's that? The system announcement caused Ling Chen to feel slightly shocked. He quickly took out another doll from his bag. This doll was a kitten doll, and although it was much smaller than the bear, it was incredibly cute. He brought it in front of Leng'Er, and smilingly said, "Leng'Er, look here, it's an even cuter one." This made Ling Chen feel like he was a father trying to cheer up his daughter. He felt incredibly awkward doing this, but this was his only choice. Leng'Er raised her face from the brown bear, and looked at the kitten doll. Her eyes seemed to be glued to the kitten, unable to budge even an inch away. Ling Chen took a step forwards, and asked, "Is it cute? If Leng'Er likes it, I can also give this one to Leng'Er." I like. Her voice was very soft, but it was evident that she was very excited by the doll. She put her hands together, and the big brown bear doll vanished from her arms. Who knew where she had stored it? She then stretched out her white hands, and took the kitten doll from Ling Chen's hands. As he gave her the kitten doll, Ling Chen stretched out his finger and touched Leng'Er's hand. He wanted to confirm if what Chiyu had said about only him being able to touch this illusory body was true or not. Indeed, he was able to touch her hand, which was soft and warm. Leng'Er hugged the small kitten doll, and gently stroked it. As she played with it, a cheerful smile appeared on her face. She seemed to have already forgotten about the fact that the person in front of her had killed the warring palace skeleton just minutes ago. Ding, your pet Leng'Er's favorability towards you +10. Ling Chen, favorability. Ling Chen suddenly remembered that since Leng'Er was counted as his pet, he should be able to see her stats page as well. He opened it, and Leng'Er's information was revealed to him. Leng'Er, type, humanoid pet level, LV18 grade, none, owner, Ling Tian, an irregular girl from the eerie castle at the heart of the Forest of Bones. Her background is unclear, and she only has half a spirit and an illusory body. She was not willing to leave the Forest of Bones, and is always carrying around a doll. She has a terrifying love for dolls. Relationship with Master, a connection created by a soul sacrifice contract, which cannot be terminated. Does not need to obey her owner's commands, and the damage taken by her will be transferred to her owner. Her level will always be equivalent to her owner's, and will live and die with her owner. Favorability to owner, -30, fearful, distrusting. Favorability is a special trait of humanoid pets, and represents how much they like their owners. The higher their favorability is, the more they like their owners, and vice versa. When their favorability is -5 to 10, their attitude to their owner is peaceful. When it is above 10, it signifies that they are close with their owner, and will listen to their owner's commands to some degree, and may even sometimes take the initiative to help their owner. When favorability is negative, it signifies that they do not like their owner, and will not obey their owner's commands, and may even leave their owner. Factors influencing a humanoid pet's favorability to their owner include the owner's attitude and kindness towards them. The kinder and more pleasant their owner is, the greater their favorability will be, and vice versa. Some events will cause the pet's favorability to massively increase or decrease. When their favorability is greater than 50, their attitude towards their owner is affection. At that point, they generally will not disobey their owner, but after reaching 50, it is incredibly difficult to increase favorability. Only special circumstances will be able to raise favorability even higher. The lowest is -100, irreconcilable hatred, and the highest is 100, mutual dependence. Physical attack power, 1 magic attack power, 560 defense, 180 critical chance, 0 pierce chance, 0 movement speed, 100 elemental resistance, water, 40% fire, 40% wind, 40% lightning, 40% earth, 40% light, -50% darkness, 100%. Passive ability, 1, illusory body, ignores all physical attacks and darkness attacks. Immune to all abnormal statuses and stat debuffs. Can float up to 100 meters high. 2. Not strong enough, unable to unlock. 3. Not strong enough, unable to unlock. Special attributes. Owner can choose whether she is visible or invisible. Under her visible condition, Leng'Er can be seen and heard by other beings. Under her invisible condition, only her owner, or beings with extremely high magic or spirit can see or hear her. Moreover, only her owner can come into contact with her body. Abilities: Darkness Spike, current level, LV2 highest level, LV5, increasing to LV3 requires pet to be LV20. A darkness element attack that uses darkness elemental energy to create a darkness spike within 20 meters around the caster. Silently and stealthily pierces towards a target within 5 meters of where the darkness spike was formed. Base attack damage is magic attack power x 180%. Upon being hit, the target has a 5% of instant death. Costs 20 MP no cooldown. Darkness Lock, current level, LV2, highest level, LV5, increasing to LV3 requires pet to be LV20. Uses darkness energy to bind all targets within 20 meters of the caster, creating illusory chains that adds debuffs to the targets. Once bound, the target's movement speed, attack speed, jumping ability, hit, evasion are all decreased by 20%. Costs 50 MP cooldown time, 60 seconds. Underworld Lock, current level, LV2 highest level, LV5, increasing to LV3 requires pet to be LV20. Uses darkness energy to bind all targets within 10 meters of the caster, creating illusory chains that adds debuffs to the targets. Once bound, the targets cannot use active skills for 10 seconds. Costs 120 MP cooldown time, 60 seconds. Doll Grenade, special skill, level cannot be increased. Transfers undead baleful aura into a doll, which is then tossed out and explodes. All targets within a radius of X meters will suffer from a terrifying undead energy attack, X equals level/2, which does no damage, but has a 70% chance of instantly killing all targets. Attack does not distinguish between friends and foes. Every use uses one doll, and consumes all current MP cooldown, 60 seconds. Can only be used 5 times every day. Ling Chen already knew some of the information about Leng'Er through Xiao Hui. Right now, Leng'Er's status was much weaker than before, and she had far less skills. Evidently, it was because Ling Chen's level was too low, and since her level would always be equivalent to his, her overall power had also brought down. As he leveled up, so would she, and thus regain her power. However, despite her stat reductions, Ling Chen was still impressed by her overall power. Evidently, her attack power was quite weak, her main abilities focused on crowd control and debuffs. Ling Chen had already experienced the terror of her movement speed debuff before, but this underworld lock, it was different to normal physical lock, which locked physical attack skills, and magic lock, which locked magic attack skills. Instead, it directly locked all skills, no matter what sort of skills they were. Because of this skill, Ling Chen had been forced to continuously hit the Warring Palace skeleton with normal attacks. If this skill was used on a magician, the effects would be devastating. With low HP, no way to attack or teleport, they would completely defenseless. As for her ultimate attack, Doll Grenade, it was a monstrous skill. An AoE skill that had a 70% of instant death. This was a nightmare to all players. Instant death was one of the most terrifying things in the gaming world. No matter how strong one was, if they didn't have resistance against instant death, all of their attack power, defense, movement speed, meant nothing. As such, this sort of overpowered skill was very rare, and usually only appeared on powerful darkness element monsters. Because of this, all players generally avoided darkness element monsters. However, Ling Chen had never seen, and no one would ever believe that there existed a skill that had a 70% chance of instant death. Even in her current state, one doll grenade from Leng'Er could instantly kill a mob of LV-100 monsters. If he didn't have his darkness crystal that gave immunity to instant death, and angered her, causing her to use this skill on him. 70% chance of instant death, this girl is simply terrifying. Even Chi Yu was shocked by this number. No matter what, I'll have to keep her with me. Otherwise, her current favorability towards him was -30, and that was only after it had increased by 10 twice, that meant that it had been -50 before. She must have utterly hated him. However, every time he gave her a doll, her favorability towards him increased by 10. With such a rate of increase, it didn't seem too hard to increase favorability. Indeed, children were easy to please. Leng'Er happily played with the kitten doll in her arms. She had probably already forgotten about the tears she had just shed. Ling Chen slowly let out a breath, and softly said, "Leng'Er, follow me from now on, all right? We'll go to the outside world, where there are lots of cute dolls. You can have as many cute dolls as you want. Leng'Er will definitely like the outside world. Come with me, all right?" At the moment, Leng'Er's attitude towards him was still fearful and distrusting. However, this was greatly made up for by the dolls she had just received. Moreover, with her mentality, she had probably wanted to go to the outside world, but did not dare to leave the giant skeleton. As such, Ling Chen's words were most likely very tempting to her. Leng'Er stared at him, her eyes still containing a hint of fear and distrust. She tightly hugged the kitten doll, and her body began to become transparent. She turned into a murky shadow and flew into Ling Chen's body. Ling Chen let out the breath he had been holding. Leng'Er voluntarily entering into the pet dimension signified that she was willing to leave with him. Even if she ran away from him, he would not be able to do anything about it. Now, it was finally time to collect the spoils or war from the Warring Palace skeleton. It turned out that while he had been talking to Leng'Er, Xiaohui had already picked up all of the items the Warring Palace skeleton had dropped. However, Xiaohui did not devour the Warring Palace skeleton's body. Ling Chen knew that Xiaohui didn't like to devour darkness element monsters. Ling Chen took out each of the items the Warring Palace skeleton dropped, and looked at them carefully. Like all of the other monsters in the Forest of Bones, the Warring Palace skeleton did not drop a single coin, but dropped 10 or so yellow potions, 1 scroll and 3 pieces of equipment. It had been far less generous than the 2 other celestial bosses he had killed in the past. Skill Scroll, Baleful Shield, Requirements, any profession above LV10. After using this scroll, the user will learn the skill, Baleful Shield. After the user's HP drops to 50%, they will reflect 10% of all physical attack damage. The skill will deactivate when the user's HP rises above 50%. This skill was exactly the same as the Warring Palace skeletons. However, while it was a godly skill on the boss, it was pretty much useless on players. Ling Chen thought about it, and decided not to use it. Although this skill was not too amazing, this was still a scroll that could allow one to directly learn a skill. It would definitely be able to fetch an astronomical price. Ling Chen looked at the 3 pieces of equipment, and his eyes shone. Although the Warring Palace skeleton had not dropped many pieces of equipment, there were 2 pieces of gold-grade equipment, and out of the 3 pieces of equipment, one was a gold-grade ring, and the other was a celestial-grade piece of equipment. Spectre Staff, Type, Long Staff Grade, Gold Equipment Requirements, Non-Priest Magical Professions above LV20. A staff made from white bones. Holding it will cause one to feel an ominous chill. Attributes, Magic Attack Power plus 70, Spirit plus 15, MP plus 100, plus 20% damage to Darkness Elemental Magic, adds a 5% chance of inflicting a curse status when casting magic attacks. For Spirit Ring, Type, Ring Grade, Gold Equipment Requirements, any profession over LV20. An ordinary ring that is hiding great and mysterious power. Wearing it increases all major stats. Attributes, Strength plus 10, Constitution plus 10, Agility plus 10, Spirit plus 10. Both of these gold-grade equips had incredible stats, especially the 4 Spirit Ring. It added a whole 40 points to the 4 basic attributes. Ling Chen immediately put it on his left hand. Every player could simultaneously equip 2 rings, one of their left hand and one on their right hand. As for the magic staff, Ling Chen decided that he would give it to Shao Qi. Right now, she had a LV-15 magic staff, so once she reached LV-20 she could change to this one. He was sure that she would be incredibly excited about it. As for the last piece of equipment, upon looking at it, Ling Chen fell into stupor for a few seconds. It was about as long as the Zephyr blade, but it was many times wider. The hilt was slightly thinner, but the blade itself was 30 or so centimeters wide. It was simply massive. The sword was so heavy that Ling Chen almost couldn't raise it up. Ling Chen had to use both hands to heft up the sword, and struggled to keep it in the air. It would be almost impossible to fight properly with this huge sword. What sort of weapon was this? Ling Chen quickly looked through its attributes. Great Ravager, type, 2-handed weapon grade, celestial equipment requirements, strength above 200. Once formally equipped, it will be bound to the user, and cannot be traded. Once discarded, it will disappear. A strength-type weapon from prehistoric ages which was created using thousands of kilograms of stones, and is incomparably heavy. There are very few people able to wield it. Its power has decreased over time, and now can be easily used. Attributes: attack power plus 220, strength plus 30, agility 30, attack speed 20. When attacking, if the target's strength is lower than the wielder's strength, there is a 100% chance of knockback, and if powerfully swung, it can also result in knockdown or knockup. Special attributes: parry level 9, when parrying, or if your attack is parried, if your strength is higher than the target, there is a chance the target's weapon will be knocked flying. Bonus skill: 1000 kg rend, uses all of the Great Ravager's mystical power to attack a single target with an incomparably heavy strike bearing the force and weight of thousands of kilograms. Base attack damage is equal to 500% of normal attack power, 100% chance of knocking the target flying, 30% chance of stunning the target for 3 to 5 seconds. Cannot be parried. Costs 130 MP cooldown, 60 seconds. Freely wield it after equipping it? Ling Chen immediately replied, yes. Immediately, a dark light passed over the Great Ravager, and entered into Ling Chen's body. In that moment, the incredibly heavy Great Ravager suddenly became much lighter. Ling Chen stood there in shock, and then lifted the sword up effortlessly. Of course, the sword was still quite heavy, but not to the same ridiculous degree. Ling Chen held the sword in one hand, and swung it. Whoosh! A gust of wind was created by Ling Chen swinging the sword, causing the sand and dust on the ground to be sent swirling into the air. Even if such a casual strike hit a person, they would still be sent sprawling. He spun, holding the Great Ravager out, and started striking out with it. The whooshing noises sounded extremely imposing, which made wielding the Great Ravager especially enjoyable. He then equipped the Zephyr blade on his left hand, and continued to spin and strike out. Adding the Zephyr blade did not decrease his attack speed, instead, it was increased. One of the Great Ravager's stats was -20 to attack speed. However, Zephyr blade had a +20 attack speed attribute. As such, the two attributes cancelled each other out, and Ling Chen's attack speed, while wielding the Great Ravager, did not decrease at all. The gusts of wind created by the Great Ravager were very pleasing to Ling Chen. The Great Ravager had completely replaced the soaring cloud spear to become his most powerful weapon, and caused his attack power to greatly increase. Ding! Your weapon, Great Ravager, is ranked number 1 in the China region equipment rankings. Do you wish to hide your personal information? After equipping the Great Ravager, a system announcement rang out. Naturally, Ling Chen replied, no need. The equipment rankings immediately changed, and the Great Ravager took the Zephyr Blade's position at the top. China Region Equipment Rankings, Rank 1, Great Ravager Type, Two-Handed Blunt Weapon Grade, Celestial Owner, Ling Tian. Rank 2, Zephyr Blade Type, Two-Handed Sword Grade, Celestial Owner, Ling Tian. Rank 3, Soaring Cloud Type, Spear Grade, Celestial Owner, Ling Tian. The equipment rankings only listed weapons of Celestial Grade or higher. Right now, there were only 3 weapons, which all belonged to one person, Ling Tian. Players had never seen a Celestial Grade equipment drop within the first month of the game, and yet in the China region there was already one person who had 3 Celestial Grade equips. This Ling Tian had caused too many miracles. Another Celestial Grade equip appearing would no doubt cause large waves across all of China again, but Ling Chen was not concerned at all. Before, Ling Chen had felt that the Great Ravager was much too heavy, but now, he was reluctant to even let go of it. He wished that he could immediately find a monster to try it out on. Of course, the main purpose was to experience the feeling of sending something flying. Ling Chen was very satisfied in receiving the Great Ravager for killing the Warring Palace skeleton. He looked at the time, and found that it was already daybreak. He had fulfilled his purpose in coming to the Forest of Bones, but the outcome had been far better than he had expected. He had destroyed the Warring Palace skeleton, but he had also gained a semi-spirit girl who he could not allow to leave his side no matter what. He would have to do all he could to protect her, as well as to get her to like him. Thinking to here, Ling Chen's head started to ache. Young Master. A minute ago, Ling Tian reached LV-18. In the Plains District, Flame Shadow quickly ran to Long Tian Yun and reported to him in a low voice. What? LV-18? Yesterday he was only LV-17. What's going on? How can he level up so quickly? Zhang Yan's face revealed an expression of shock, whereas Long Tianyun frowned, but did not say anything. Moreover, a new Celestial Grade equip appeared on the equipment rankings, and it's ranked number 1. It belongs to Ling Tian. Flame Shadow continued. Oh. Long Tianyun and Zhang Yan opened the equipment rankings, and looked at the Great Ravager at the top. A hint of shock and jealousy flashed within Zhang Yan's eyes, but he immediately laughed. Forget it, this sort of arrogant person can only rely on his level and equipment to seem cool. In the afternoon, we'll show him what a true expert is. Young Master, this afternoon, we don't even need the Sword Emperor to go and fight him. Let me fight him and I'll give him an unforgettable lesson. Although Zhang Yan was quite strong, he was one to hold grudges against other people easily. The words Ling Tian had spoken to him the day before had not been forgotten by him, and he was still seeking a way to take revenge. Long Tianyun raised his hand, and calmly said, "Don't look down on him too much. It's impossible to obtain 3 Celestial Grade equipment in such a short time with pure luck and no strength." However, Long Tianyun's eyes narrowed, and he said in a low voice, "However, he's definitely not a match for Xiaoyu. Right now, Xiaoyu might not even lose to that Eve." Long Tianyun did not doubt that Ling Tian was powerful. After all of his weapons were the best in the virtual world. However, he understood just how monstrous the Sword Emperor was. Even if the Sword Emperor's equipment could not be compared to Ling Tian's, that did not matter. All the Sword Emperor needed was one sword. Of course. Ling Tian's just a newbie expert who just entered the virtual world. I'd like to see him maintain his arrogance after today. Also, his equipment will soon belong to our Yan Huang alliance. I want to see his pitiful expression so badly, Zhang Yan said as he coldly smiled. Long Tianyun flicked his wrist, and his expression darkened. This is not too important right now. Flame Shadow, has the Dark Knight made any progress? Flame Shadow quickly replied, "Please rest assured, young master, although Peter Pan has hidden himself quite well, the Dark Knight will definitely find him within 5 days. As per their rules, if they can't complete a request that they accepted, they'll pay back 10 times the amount as compensation. Young master offered them 150 million gold. If they can't fulfill it, they'll have to pay back 1.5 billion gold. I'm sure they wouldn't allow such a thing to happen. No matter what time it was, the Azure Dragon Square was always overflowing with people. This sort of situation would continue until the average level of players was about LV50, when the central imperial city would be unlocked. Ling Chen equipped a discreet-looking set of clothes, and went directly to the marketplace. Right now, the most important thing was to make sure that the semi-spirit girl liked him, or at least did not have a negative favorability. Otherwise, if she ran off, Ling Chen could die at any moment. He walked into the toy store, and saw a world of dolls. Although the money exchange system had been opened, there was still not much business there. After all, it was much more economical and practical to buy toys or dolls in the real world. Plus, given that it was only daybreak, Ling Chen was the only customer in the toy store. This caused him to feel a bit more at ease. "Hello sir, may I ask what sort of toy you are looking for?" The one who greeted Ling Chen was the same beautiful saleswoman from before when Ling Chen had bought the most expensive toy, the Moonlight Treasure Box. As such, she still clearly remembered Ling Chen, and greeted him enthusiastically. Ling Chen walked to where all the dolls were, and then said in his mind, "Leng'Er, come out and have a look. There are lots of dolls here." Leng'Er was unable to resist the temptation of dolls, and immediately appeared with the kitten doll in her arms. Ling Chen had put her in her invisible mode, so apart from him, no one could see or hear her, or the things she held or wore. Seeing the world of dolls around her, Leng'Er's eyes glazed over, and she continuously turned her head around, looking at all the dolls. To her, this was something that could only exist in a dream. Dolls, so many dolls. Leng'Er stretched out her hands, and gently leapt towards a big dolphin doll and pressed her entire body against it, gently stroking it with her little hands. This was the largest doll she had seen in her entire life. It was much larger than her own body, however, although she could touch the dolls, she couldn't take them away. She tried to embrace them then take them away with her, but she was unable to do so. She began to become worried, and teardrops began to form at the corners of her eyes. She finally thought of something, and looked at Ling Chen with a pitiful and pleading expression. She was sure that somehow Ling Chen could get her this big doll. Leng'Er's look caught him off guard, and had a great effect on him. He immediately gave in, and hurriedly said, "I'll take this dolphin doll." "Of course, sir. Please wait momentarily." Very quickly, the purchase was completed and Ling Chen put the dolphin doll into Leng'Er's arms. Leng'Er embraced it tightly, and buried her face into its back, unwilling to let it go. Ding! Leng'Er's favorability towards you +8. Ling Chen smiled, and looked around. He thought for a bit then said, "Excuse me, all of the cloth and plush dolls, I have one, no, two of each." 2 of each cloth or plush doll. This was an enormous sale. The beautiful saleswoman's eyes lit up, and excited said, "Certainly. Please wait, I'll prepare them for you quickly." In total, there were 600 or so different types of dolls in the shop. Some were bigger than people, some were as big as one's hand. The cheapest ones were only a few gold coins each, whereas the best ones were worth tens of thousands of gold coins. 2 of each of the 600 dolls costed Ling Chen about 900,000 gold. However, to him, who had hundreds of millions of gold, this was not that much to him anymore. All of these dolls were of course to please this girl who loved dolls. "I want dolls. I want," Ling Chen secretly smiled inside. This time, without him saying anything, Leng'Er had run after him. He had walked to a space beside the toy store where there was not anyone present, and smiled as Leng'Er floated over. Leng'Er stopped in front of him, and looked at him with a pleading expression. She had clearly seen him buy many dolls, all of which were extremely pretty and cute. She wanted every single one of them. Although she was still a little bit afraid of this person who had killed her companion, her love of dolls was greater. Dolls. I want. Please give me dolls. Her voice was as soft and gentle as a little kitten's mewing, and did not contain a bit of the coldness or resentment from back when Ling Chen had first met her. Seeing her like this, Ling Chen did not feel she was complicated or mysterious at all, but rather pure and naive. She had already completely forgotten about the giant skeleton and the forest of bones, and her desirous expression for dolls was extremely cute, just like a little child's. Ling Chen smiled, and leaned forward. He revealed what he had been hiding behind his back. In his hand was a doll wearing the same type of black dress Leng'Er was wearing. It was an extremely beautiful princess doll. He held it in front of Leng'Er and asked, "Leng'Er, do you like this?" It was probably the first time Leng'Er had seen a humanoid doll. This doll was extremely well made and beautiful, and was as cute as Leng'Er herself. It had been extremely expensive. Ling Chen remembered clearly that it had costed 60,000 gold. It was clear that Leng'Er extremely liked this doll. This incredibly cute doll caused her eyes to sparkle brightly, and she stared unblinkingly at it. After a long time, she stretched out her hands, while gently saying, "So pretty, so cute, I want." Perhaps it was because she only had half a spirit, and adding on the fact that she had lived for so long away from civilization in the forest of bones, it was quite difficult for Leng'Er to talk smoothly. Just as her two little hands were about to come into contact with the princess doll, Ling Chen pulled his hands back, and put the doll behind his back. Afterwards, he smilingly said to her, "Leng'Er, did you know, in the outside world, only good and obedient kids can have dolls as rewards." Is Leng'Er going to be obedient? Obedient? Leng'Er was a bit confused. Yes. For example, I'm now Leng'Er's master, so if Leng'Er calls me master, I'll give this doll to the obedient Leng'Er. Ling Chen smiled. It was extremely easy to please children. Oh, Leng'Er hugged the big dolphin doll, blinking her eyes, as if she was trying very hard to understand what obedient and master meant. However, none of this mattered in comparison to the doll. For the doll, she called out, "Master." Being called master by a girl was a weirdly nice sensation to Ling Chen. He took out the princess doll from behind his back, and put it in Leng'Er's hands. Leng'Er is so good and obedient. This princess doll is Leng'Er's reward. As long as Leng'Er is obedient, master will give Leng'Er lots of cute dolls. If Leng'Er is really obedient, maybe she'll get lots of dolls. Not only did giving her dolls raise her favorability, but it also gave him a chance to talk to her. This way, she would naturally not be afraid of him after some time, and would grow closer to him. Ding! Leng'Er's favorability towards you +12. This time, Leng'Er's favorability towards him had increased by 12, raising her favorability to -10. Right now, Ling Chen's actions were sufficient to get rid of Leng'Er's hostility and fear of him, and assured her that he would not harm her. Rather, following him would result in her having lots of dolls. Leng'Er put away the dolphin doll, and took the extremely cute princess doll into her arms. Leng'Er closed her eyes, and an extremely radiant and satisfied smile appeared on her face. Indeed, it was a smile that was full of happiness and joy. It was the first time Ling Chen had seen such a smile on Leng'Er's face. Evidently, she loved this doll immensely. In that case, of course, Ling Chen wouldn't take out the best doll from the very beginning. After a short while, he took out a princess doll wearing a rainbow dress. It was as large as the other one, but it was much more colorful and pretty. The moment he took it out, Leng'Er's intense gaze told him that she wanted this doll greatly as well. Leng'Er, remember what I said just then, only good, obedient kids can have dolls as rewards. If Leng'Er wants to hug her, Leng'Er has to listen to master, okay? I will, listen, be obedient. Leng'Er had no resistances against cute and pretty things. Right now, her greatest desire was to have this doll. In order to have it, she was willing to do anything Ling Chen told her to. "And, that's right." Ling Chen nodded, and said, "So, tell me, what's your name?" "Name?" Leng'Er opened her mouth, and gazed at the princess doll in Ling Chen's hands. After a moment, she quietly said, "Leng'er, right." Ling Chen contently nodded his head. "I'll call you Leng'er, and what will Leng'er call me?" This time, Leng'er didn't have to think, and answered, "Mas, ter, haha, Leng'er's so smart." "In that case, I'll give this cute doll to Leng'er as a reward." Ling Chen could feel that the emotional distance between Leng'er and himself was rapidly shrinking. He smiled, and gave the princess doll to Leng'er. Leng'er happily took it into her hands, and holding one princess in each arm, the warm and radiant smile once again appeared on her face. Her ridiculously happy expression was so cute that Ling Chen spaced out staring at her for a while. He couldn't help but walk a bit closer, wanting to stroke her long hair. Ling Chen moving close to her caused Leng'er to take fright. By the time his hand almost reached her head, she shot away like a scared little cat. Far away, she tightly hugged the two dolls, her face slightly shaking as she looked at him with a bewildered expression. Ling Chen's hand froze in midair, and he inwardly kicked himself. He had been too rash. Although he had shortened the emotional distance between Leng'er and himself, her favorability towards him was still in the negatives. It was natural that she would act in such a way when he tried to touch her. Luckily, her favorability did not drop because of that. This was something that could not be rushed. From today's progress, it seemed that as long as he was patient, in not too long, Leng'er's favorability towards him would no longer be negative. "Leng'er, don't be afraid, I'm your master, so I'll only protect you and give you lots of cute dolls. I'll never hurt you," Ling Chen said smilingly. Of course, the best method was, he took out another doll. "Look. This one's also very cute, I'll give it to Leng'er." Attracted by the doll, Leng'er's fright disappeared, and she floated over, and embraced the new doll. As long as it was a doll, she would like it. It seemed that she would never get sick of dolls. After successfully calming her down, Ling Chen looked at the time and found that it was nearly dawn. He bent down, and said to Leng'er, "Leng'er, when master comes back, if you're good and obedient, you'll get even more dolls tomorrow." After Leng'er returned to the pet dimension, Ling Chen let out a breath, able to rest assured that she wouldn't run off. He rubbed his face, and felt that what he had just done was even more tiring than fighting an intense battle. Right now, Leng'er's favorability to him was -10, if it kept increasing at the current rate, it would be positive by the next day. However, thinking to the fact that he would have to keep this up for a long time, he couldn't help but sigh. Afterwards, Ling Chen decided to log off. In the afternoon, he would have his duel with the Sword Emperor. He was confident in his strength, but definitely would not underestimate his opponent. After all, the Sword Emperor's strength was undisputed and was like a legend to Chinese players. In order to be at his peak condition, he needed to rest, so that his mind and spirit could cope with whatever was thrown at him. There was a sea of heads, and no matter where you looked, you couldn't see the end of it. The crowd was so vast that anyone looking at the scene would break out in cold sweat. Despite the huge number of people flowing in, they had left a very large empty space. These players were clearly not here to train. These immeasurable groups of players were all swarming here for a purpose. They all wanted to personally witness Mystic Moon's first official fight. On one side, the super cool, super dark horse Ling Chen stood against the greatly supported, #1 player of China, Sword Emperor. Ling Chen was the first to actively challenge the Sword Emperor since he became famous. In addition, the stakes for this fight were also a cause for excitement. On one side was the guild creation token, but on the other were 2 celestial-grade weapons. The fight was initiated yesterday morning, and news of it had spread so far throughout China that not a single person didn't know about it. Such awareness naturally brought the attention of major media, who only served to add fuel to the flames. And then the news was quickly exaggerated to a point where the whole world knew. Even the mere challenge of the Yan-Huang alliance in the public was insulting enough for the press to descend upon them. After all, both parties were already world-famous people, especially the Sword Emperor. The number of times that the Sword Emperor had used his moves in public was very rare. The people all earnestly hoped that they would be able to witness the Sword Emperor's power with their own eyes. It was high noon and Yun Meng Xian, Shao Qi, Su'er, Mu Bingyao who still hadn't come out of the first district of the Plains region were startled by the sight of the immeasurable crowd before them. They had been afraid that many people would want to observe and so there would be no space, which was why they decided to come early. This was just way more than they expected. Shao Qi stuck out her tongue, and looked to Yun Meng Xian, Big Sister Meng Xian, what do we do? With so many people there's no way we can force our way in. Yun Meng Xian didn't hesitate for long and gently shook her head, let's go back. When the time comes there should be a live broadcast. But I want to see Big Brother Ling Tian beat Sword Emperor with my own eyes. It will be incredible. Su, you want to see it with your own eyes too, don't you? Shao Qi said reluctantly, her lips curled. In this fight, not many people favored Ling Tian to win and most people only came to witness the prowess of the Sword Emperor. After all, Ling Chen's strength was primarily determined through the grade of the equipment he had revealed and no one knew about his true strength, whereas everyone knew the strength of the Sword Emperor. But for Ling Chen, they knew of his 3 celestial grade weapons and his 2 strong pets. This equipment could be considered the finest in all of China, creating jealousy in all players who saw them. But how did he do it? The people would not forget that in the last fight of the previous virtual world, the Sword Emperor was completely covered in silver equipment, yet getting a single-handed silver sword was not something an average player would be able to attain. There was no earring, no ring, no necklace, the highest grade equipment the Sword Emperor had was silver grade, and yet during the fight, the Sword Emperor easily defeated the top 5 in the Heaven rankings. Which of the players on the Heaven rankings was not strong? Moreover, in the late game, their equipment was of incomparable magnificence. At that point, the lowest grade was the Celestial grade and some even had a whole body full of Heaven's End equipment, but it was no help against the simple equipment of the Sword Emperor. And so, even with Ling Chen's reputation of being astonishingly strong, there was still little faith that he would be able to defeat the Sword Emperor. This was also the opinion of Long Tianyun, who most fully understood the real strength of the Sword Emperor. On the contrary, Ling Tian appeared extremely arrogant in his eyes. Moreover, it seemed as if he had never been in the virtual world before, what with not having seen Long Tianyun or the Sword Emperor before. And to think that one was unmatched in strength purely because of equipment grade was extremely conceited. How could this kind of person defeat the Sword Emperor? But in the unlikely event that Ling Tian managed to actually defeat the Sword Emperor, then his reputation would rise exponentially overnight. He would have also technically beaten those the Sword Emperor had beaten. He would become the new first rank. Let's go back, in order to avoid danger, Mu Bingyao said, and then turned around to start heading back. Mu Big Sister is right. There are too many people here, which means there are many risk factors. Plus, even if we stay, it will be impossible to push to the front, Yun Meng Xian said, Chi, Su, let's go back. We still have 2 more hours and even more people will arrive in that time. Although there was still some reluctance to leave, Mu Bingyao and Yun Meng Xian both agreed on returning. So it was best to return together to the city, to the cabin that belonged to Heart's Dream. Even though Yun Meng Xian had already attained 900 million gold of funds from Ling Tian, she hadn't started using it yet and they still stayed in the small cabin, unwilling to leave it. The girls had just returned to the Heart's Dream cabin when there was a flash of white and the pure Shui Ruo appeared. Shao Qi faced up and shouted anxiously and excitedly, Ruo, is Ling Tian Big Brother here yet? We want to encourage him face to face. He must defeat the Sword Emperor. Ruo, did your brother go directly to the Plains district? Yunmeng Xian looked at the time. The time until the fight was still 1 hour and 40 minutes. Shui Ruo gently laughed. Big brother said he had some other things to do, so he didn't come with me. But you don't have to worry about him. If he says he can defeat the Sword Emperor, then he definitely can. Of course I believe Ling Tian, big brother. But, that Sword Emperor is really strong. I'll ask Ling Tian, big brother, where he is now, Xiao Qi said as she picked up her communication device. Let it go, he definitely has something important to do. Let's not bother him, Yunmeng Xian said. Oh, okay. Xiao Qi heard what Yunmeng Xian said and obediently put the communications device down. The time slowly passed as people anxiously waited for the fight. The Plains district was filled with more and more people as time went on, so much so that if a piece of meteorite landed in the plains right now, it would be the biggest tragedy in history. Be that as it may, even more and more people kept going in. It was impossible to force your way through since so many were unwilling to leave, and yet so many continued to accumulate. Within the crowd there remained that large empty gap. The leaders of both parties had not yet arrived. The time drew nearer still and the disturbance in the crowd grew less. They were looking at the time, anxiously but excitedly waiting for what was to come. Finally, after a little while, there were what was probably 100 troops coming from the west. A voice rang out. Look! It is the Yan Huang Alliance. Leader of the alliance, the Sword Emperor, and the Flame Emperor are here. The crowd was in turmoil and everyone tried to see past each other. Those 100 troops were led by Long Tian Yun, who had the Sword Emperor on his right and the Flame Emperor on his left. With the protection of these two people, no one in the world could harm Long Tian Yun. It's Long Tian Yun. The leader of the Yan Huang Alliance, he really came. It looks like this fight is of great importance to him. Of course he will be here, because of what is at stake. The two celestial grade equips. I suspect that Ling Tian chose to wager these two celestial equips so as to catch the attention of the Alliance Master. That is the Sword Emperor. His appearance, his step, his breath, it gives off such a sense of indescribable mysteriousness. I can finally say I've seen the Sword Emperor with my own eyes. I hope Ling Tian can last a little longer. Ooh, someone before was taking bets that the Sword Emperor will defeat Ling Tian within 10 seconds. My stomach couldn't take what he was saying, so I started arguing with him and we almost got into a fight. Che! If the Sword Emperor gives Ling Tian seconds, he has already given him some respect. What about that makes you uncomfortable? Do you really think that Ling Tian, the kind of person who came from nobody knows where, could defeat the Sword Emperor? That's right, I don't feel good about it. Say that the Sword Emperor will defeat Ling Tian in 10 seconds again and I will knock your teeth out. 5 seconds. The Sword Emperor must defeat Ling Tian within 5 seconds at most. I will lose it if anyone says 10 seconds. That is an insult to the Sword Emperor. Look, to his left is the Flame Emperor. Legends say that in the past, over 100 players were killed within a second when he cast his strongest move. Over 100. He is a fire elementalist and the fire that he casts is many times stronger than others. Anyone who touches it will die. When can my magic ever reach even half of his potency? Che, if you can reach 1/10 of the Flame Emperor's strength it would be good enough already, let alone half. The people engaged in heated discussions, staring earnestly at them. As the Yan Huang Alliance moved through the crowd, they opened up and allowed them access to the middle. A line of 100 people altogether may have seemed extreme, but even a fool knew that wherever Long Tian Yun appeared, there would be many members of the alliance present. In addition to the 100 members, there would also be a huge number of Yan Huang Alliance members concealed in the crowd. Long Tian Yun and the Sword Emperor had already arrived but there was no sign of Ling Tian. Standing in the middle, Zhang Yan looked around and sneered, this Ling Tian is very daring. He dare let the alliance leader and the Sword Emperor wait on him. Under the myriad of gazes, Long Tian Yun's expression did not waver, but deep down he was feeling uncomfortable. In the guild rankings, there was title that was maliciously hung above his name to shame him. Underneath is the Yan Huang alliance that the dog set up. Anyone who opened the guild rankings could see it. That was equivalent to standing on his face and taking a dump on the Yan Huang alliance. Until he took this down, he would forever be in turmoil on the inside. He looked around and saw many familiar faces. The people that were stationed near to the front were not just ordinary people. They were strong leaders, and even through the dark night, he could see quite a few. It looked like this fight had interested too many people. "Xiaoyu, when you are fighting, finish it quickly," Long Tian Yun said in a low voice. The Sword Emperor did not respond and remained still, like a statue. "Flame Emperor, have you prepared the revival scrolls?" Long Tian Yun turned to ask. Flame Emperor nodded. "Relax, young master. When Ling Tian is killed by the Sword Emperor, I will immediately bring him back to life." Ahem, such a precious revival scroll to be used on Ling Tian, what a waste of resources, Zhang Yan said in disdain. Although it will be a waste, the motivation behind it is wise. Firstly, it can demonstrate the kind-heartedness of the Yan Huang alliance. Secondly, after bringing Ling Chen back to life, he will have to hand over the celestial equips on the spot. Otherwise, if he dies and returns to the city, he can quickly throw the equips away and no one would know. The time was gradually closing in on 2 p.m. until only a few minutes remained before the fight. Once upon a time, there lived a king and a queen. They gave birth to a lovely girl. This girl's skin was as white as snow, her cheeks were rosy like apples, and she had jet black hair. She was so beautiful as Leng'Er, and so the king and queen decided to name her Snow White. Not only was Snow White beautiful, but she was also very obedient and had a good heart. She loved playing with the animals in the forest, such as the fawn, small rabbits, squirrels, and birds. The animals all liked Snow White because Snow White brought food for them to eat and told them stories. She lived every day happily. Not long after, Snow White's mother passed away. Her stepmother was very pretty but wicked. She hated Snow White for being prettier than her and secretly wanted to kill her for it. The witch was finally subjected to God's punishment, and died. Snow White promised to marry the prince, and they held a grand wedding. From then on, Snow White and the prince lived happily ever after. After telling yet another story, Ling Chen opened his eyes to see the young girl nearby. Leng'Er was lying on a small bed of soft toys made by Ling Chen. She rolled around occasionally, but was otherwise so peaceful and so comfortable that she didn't want to come back down. On this bed of dolls, she was almost like a doll herself, and a beautiful and cute one too. "This is Snow White's story, does Leng'Er like it?" Ling Chen asked with a smile. "I like, master, I want to hear more stories." Leng'Er turned around to lie on her stomach, looking at Ling Chen with her dark eyes. "You still want to listen?" Ling Chen was beginning to think that telling her children stories was not the right thing to do. Telling stories like this was not something he did particularly well. He thought, and closed his eyes, saying, "Well, I'll just tell Leng'Er the Snow White story again. Once upon a time, there was a beautiful, lovely girl. Her name was Snow White. Uncle Hunter could not bear to kill Snow White, and so he released her, letting her escape. Snow White kept running into the forest and then she ran into a boy. This boy's name was Pinocchio and he had a really strange nose. Whenever he told a lie, his nose would grow longer, and when he told the truth, his nose would grow shorter. Snow White fell in love with Pinocchio's nose's ability to grow longer and shorter, and from that day lived happily ever after. The end. This time, Leng'Er's face was vacant. "Master, why would Snow White like a nose that could grow longer and shorter?" Her head was cocked, as she thought about this question. This question, Ling Chen smirked, "Leng'Er will understand when she is a little older. So Leng'Er should be obedient, so this way you will grow up faster." Leng'Er still didn't understand. Moreover, what does being obedient and growing up have to do with each other? After looking for a while, Ling Chen let out a yawn and stood up from the grass, stretching his waist. Looking one last time, he closed in on Leng'Er, and said with a smile, "Leng'Er, I think we'll stop now for today. Seeing as you were so good today, these dolls are all yours. If you like to listen to stories, I will come back tomorrow to tell you more. For now, I will take you to a place with many people, it'll be fun." Seeing Leng'Er's attitude towards him, Ling Chen couldn't help but smile as he got back up. Attitude towards the master, too, normal, finally, it was finally a positive value. A positive value meant Leng'Er would no longer reject him and wouldn't try to run away. So, he finally felt at peace. Who knew, when he had a child with Shura, he would probably coax them like this. Right now, we should go to the Plains District. Looking at the direction of the Plains District, Ling Chen's warm smile slowly became cold. Second District of the Plains region. When Ling Chen arrived, it was in the final moments before the determined time. He directed the cloud-stepping mare to quickly rush ahead, and was greatly shocked by the crowd that was far ahead. Many people were expected, but surely this was too many. But even facing the terrifying number of people present, Ling Chen still did not reduce his speed and continued to rush ahead. Ah! Ling Tian. Ling Tian is here. That's correct. It really is Ling Tian. He's finally here. I thought he wouldn't dare to come. Make way, quickly make way. In front of Ling Chen, the dense crowd quickly moved aside to make a passage for him. Ling Chen was very fast, but the crowd split apart just as quickly. Ling Chen was then able to move through the crowd without obstruction, such that from above, he resembled a sharp knife cutting through the crowd. Not long after, Ling Chen managed to rush through to the center of the district. There, the people of the Yan Huang Alliance were waiting for him. As he neared, he used one hand to press onto the horse and launched himself up high from the horse, gliding the next 10 m. With him descending so quickly, many people were expecting him to meet his unfortunate end, but as Ling Chen reached the ground, he landed solidly on his 2 feet, completely still. He didn't even wobble, let alone fall, not swaying once. Although not intentional, Ling Chen's entrance was way more impressive than the Yan Huang Alliance's traditional entrance. When he arrived, there were quite a few people staring at him, yet he merely took a quick look at his surroundings before facing Long Tianyun, declaring, "Phew, I ended up not being late." With not even a second to spare, "You really did make it on time," said Long Tianyun cynically. He stared for a time, then raised one hand, "Ling Tian, since the time has already come, so let's begin. Are you ready?" Long Tianyun was vigorous and resolute as always. Never one to waste time on idle talk, he immediately started the fight the moment he arrived. This also meant that he had absolute confidence in the Sword Emperor. Ling Chen gently laughed and said, "This line should be mine, Alliance Master Long. Have you prepared the guild creation token?" I believe with his prestige, and with so many of his friends present to witness, Alliance Master Long would not fail to bring this item. Puffed, many of players at the scene spat. Ha ha ha. Long Tianyun bellowed. Laughing and clapping his hands, his eyes were slits and his whole face was filled with a happy expression. "Ling Tian, I feel like I'm beginning to like you. For your energy and courage, even I, Long Tianyun, can't help but admire it. Concerning the guild creation token, you can have faith. Whatever I say, goes. I will never say something I don't mean. What about you, did you bring Soaring Cloud and Zephyr Blade? The equipment ranking has my name written on it, what do you think?" Ling Chen replied. "Very good, then, let's begin. I believe your time is extremely precious." Xiaoyu. Shouting towards the Sword Emperor, Long Tianyun and the others retreated into the crowd. The silent Sword Emperor finally started moving, taking 2 steps forward, standing probably less than 10 steps away from Ling Chen. He didn't seem to do anything, his body covered in silver with a tall and slender single-handed sword in his right hand. That's right, a single-handed sword. The Sword Emperor only used a single-handed sword. A single-handed sword was held with one hand, usually accompanied with a shield so that one hand held the sword and one hand held the shield. But a single-handed sword of the same grade and level was hugely different to a double-handed sword. If one hand is not needed, then it tended to be that one would choose a double-handed sword, but the Sword Emperor was the exception. His left hand was empty, yet no one had ever seen him use a double-handed sword, only the single-handed sword. It seemed that the Sword Emperor was holding was a silver-grade sword. At the present stage, silver weapons were rare, but compared to the celestial weapons that Ling Chen had, there was obviously a big difference. Since it is a contest, it needs to be fair. Relax, I will not take advantage of you because of your equipment. Ling Chen opened his mouth and what he said made the people's chins almost hit the ground. There was a dim ray of light, and something that appeared to look like a lance appeared in Ling Chen's hand. It was a one-handed sword. But that sword, as people would have seen before, was a cheap sword from the store. It was a sword that might not have even been picked up, a level 15 common sword. The equipment on me is significantly stronger than yours, so my weapon should be weaker compared to yours. This way, neither will have an advantage. Let's begin. Ling Chen lifted his right hand and pointed his sword at the Sword Emperor. The large crowd exploded with excitement. Is this Ling Tian guy crazy? If he uses his celestial equipment he might stand a chance, but now he is using a common equipment. He's suicidal. He doesn't know his own strength. Who does he think he is? He is facing the Sword Emperor. You should be packing everything you can to face the Sword Emperor. Ha ha ha, that's too funny. He's definitely never seen the strength of the Sword Emperor. Use whatever you want. The result will be the same. It must be that Ling Tian knows he can't win, so he is using a common sword to keep his reputation. 3 seconds. 3 seconds at most, no longer than that. The crowd was filled with laughing, taunting, various snorts and comments of contempt. Ling Chen's overestimation of his own ability was simply ridiculous. Extremely arrogant. Xiao Qiufeng, who was filled with anticipation, said as he wrinkled her brow. Against anyone else it would be just, but this is the Sword Emperor. The calmest was none other than Yunfeng. He completely understood why Ling Tian did this. The Sword Emperor could not beat Eve, but Ling Tian was on the same level of Eve in terms of strength, and so he was willing to take a cheap weapon in fighting the Sword Emperor. After hearing the words of Xiao Qiufeng, he laughed and leisurely said, "This is a strong sense of self-respect, and also a lot of pride. But, if he says something like that, when he beats the Sword Emperor, no one can say that the reason he won was because of his equipment, don't you think so?" Xiao Qiufeng nodded without speaking. The crowd quarreled on for a long time, until Long Tianyun called out, with a smile on his face, "Ling Tian, you need not do so. Equips are the measure of strength, you can still use your strongest equipment." "Hey, young master, you don't need to waste time with this nonsense," Zhang Yan said, without waiting for Ling Chen's reply, as he walked out from the crowd, carrying a look of contempt and sneering at him. "Ling Tian, you are the first to dare to act so wildly before the Yan-Huang alliance. Before you and the Sword Emperor fight, I have a few words to say." He looked at Ling Chen from head to toe and narrowed his eyes. "The Sword Emperor, who is my superior in the Yan-Huang alliance, cannot be challenged by anyone. And you, who have no qualifications whatsoever, wish to challenge the Sword Emperor? Sure, but first defeat me if you can. If you cannot even defeat me, then go away, for you are not qualified to challenge the Sword Emperor of the Yan-Huang alliance." "Well said. Fight the Flame Emperor first." Who is the Flame Emperor? If he is chosen, it would be a great honor. To the players, the more chaos the better. After Tsang Yen spoke, the crowd once again began to make a racket. Of course, many of these were the people of the Yan-Huang alliance adding fuel to the fire. Long Tian Yun's expression did not change, nor did he make a sound. The voice by Long Tian Yun's side made Tsang Yen smile even harder. He sneered and said, "Ling Tian, come, change to your strongest equipment and try me. I will let you attack first, but if you do not have the courage to do this, best you leave the two celestial equipment behind and be gone. Save yourself the embarrassment." Tsang Yen was prone to bearing grudges. Ling Chen still kept what he said yesterday in his heart. He was looking for an opportunity to mercilessly humiliate and teach Tsang Yen a lesson, and in his eyes, this was good opportunity. Ling Chen looked at him. Looking at this contempt was like looking at an idiot. Suddenly. Swish. Bang. The people could only see the silhouette passing by. At almost the same time, there was a loud collision that rang out in everyone's ears. Ah! 12,108. After the sounds and the shout, a purple damage value appeared. It floated above a human figure. Tsang Yen. The scream was Tsang Yen being smacked away like a ball. High and far away he flew. He flew above the empty space in the center of the district, then towards the surrounding crowd, hitting some players above the head. Normally when someone was making an action, there would be a warning motion, allowing the opponent to know what was coming, but no one clearly saw Ling Chen's movements. When they heard the sound of the collision and Tsang Yen's voice, all they could see was Tsang Yen flying into the distance, the scarily high damage value, the neon green sword that was held in his hands and the other weapon which was the shape of a giant stone column. No one knew even when Ling Chen managed to pull it out before Tsang Yen. Afterward, it was Ling Chen's voice that rang out. If you don't want to permanently disappear from the rankings, be careful of what comes out of your mouth. No one saw how Ling Tian pulled out his weapon, and definitely no one saw him move. It all just happened in a split second and all they could see was the result, that the Flame Emperor was defeated. The Flame Emperor was taunting Ling Tian, treating him with contempt, when suddenly he was killed by Ling Tian. Moreover, he was launched a few hundred meters into the air, flying so far and so high, it must have been a terrifying attack. And that damage value was over tens of thousands. Enough to kill Tsang Yen dozens of times over. Who was Tsang Yen? China's fourth-ranking player, the top elementalist. No other elementalists were able to surpass his power. He was worshipped by many players and was admired by many more. When he provoked Ling Tian, the people were looking forward to a great display of his strength, but in the end, he was killed. It was instantaneous, it wasn't even a struggle when he was killed by Ling Tian. If you don't want to permanently disappear from the rankings, be careful of what comes out of your mouth. It was a voice of slight disdain, of one who had killed the Flame Emperor in 1 second. Tsang Yen had sneered at him for being overconfident, but that's right, it was actually Tsang Yen who was overconfident in his own ability. He spoke as if the fourth-ranking Flame Emperor was nothing but a pitiful ant in his eyes. But upon hearing this taunt, no one dared laugh. All of the Flame Emperor's subordinates knew that he had eaten his words. He brought the humiliation upon himself. Yun Feng had a wry smile, which he then couldn't help but turn into a grin. He was the one who understood Ling Chen's real strength the most, and he hadn't believed that the fight against the Flame Emperor would be particularly suspenseful, but he didn't think it would end this quickly and cleanly, dealing tens of thousands of damage, and launching him hundreds of meters away. Such a picture was definitely intimidating, such strength indubitably terrifying. Is that the level of Eve, the highest peak of human strength? He looked at Xiao Qiufeng from the corner of his eye. The sight of the cold magistrate with his brows raised satisfied him. He believed that the cold magistrate would never say that Ling Tian was overconfident ever again. After a period of deathly silence, the crowd burst out. Wow! So cool! In the house where the fight was being broadcasted live, Shao Qi jumped up. both hands cupping her cheeks. Jumping around, she didn't even know what she was doing, but she couldn't express the excitement that she was feeling. Su'er was covering her lips with both her hands, her eyes shining. Yunmeng Xian's pupils widened in awe, and Shui Ruo was cheering in laughter. Her happiness was incomparable. Ling Tian managed to, in one shot, defeat not an ordinary player, but the fourth-ranking, awe-inspiring Flame Emperor. This alone would make him world-famous. The calmest of all was Mu Bingyao. Her expression was indifferent, as if what just happened was completely normal and nothing out of the blue. The Flame Emperor has been killed, over 10,000 damage. What? Is this real? What was that skill just then? Over 10,000 damage, 10,000. Is this Ling Tian's real strength? Even facing the Flame Emperor, he can easily defeat him. That is scary levels of strength. With this strength, who can escape that technique? The stone pillar-looking weapon he is carrying, could it be the equip that has recently appeared on the equipment rankings? The instant defeat of the Flame Emperor gave the players new insight. The players' impression towards Ling Chen had changed completely from that of privileged, rich, and extremely arrogant, to feelings of fear towards him, and maybe even a growing support for him. The people had moved aside to make way as the Flame Emperor flew, and they could now see his body lying on the ground bent. That one technique had dealt over 10,000 damage. There was no way the Flame Emperor would survive. He was laying there as dead as could be. Before, he had energetically come out to challenge Ling Tian, but the situation had changed so much in a blink of an eye that he didn't even have a chance to attack before dying. His former provocations towards Ling Tian now all just seemed a joke. Yaha. At this time, a large number of players rushed out into the district center. Ling Chen found himself completely surrounded. There seemed to be thousands of players surrounding Ling Chen, with the tanks at the front, the warriors in the middle, and the mages at the back who were starting to recite their spells. The archers pulled their bowstrings and the summoners started their incantations. All this was aimed at their mutual target, which was Ling Tian in the middle. These people were all the members of the Yan Huang Alliance. Seeing the Flame Emperor killed, they could no longer idly stand by and so had rushed out. The sudden action quietened the scene, making it peaceful once again, but immediately the sounds of whispers could be heard. What is the meaning of this? They want to attack from all directions? The Flame Emperor tried to pick a fight with Ling Tian and that's what got him killed. The Flame Emperor got himself killed, but such a big Yan Huang Alliance attack for that? They couldn't win, so they are attacking from all sides? Ling Chen looked around at the people surrounding him, and laughed coldly, clapping loudly. Ha 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 ha, I've heard that the Yan Huang Alliance was large in number, what with being China's #1 guild. Today, it seems like you have really fulfilled that reputation. Your Flame Emperor tried to pick on me, so I completely defeated him. Tut tut. Your sudden, overwhelming number of superiority puts on a good show. As the #1 guild in all of China, you have really given me some respect. Ling Chen's words were the most cutting of taunts, especially that last line. The anger of the Yan Huang Alliance members grew. Unseen, Ling Chen looked around the crowd, and turned to face Long Tianyun. If you want to attack me, then get it over with. I don't think there's a point of a duel between the Sword Emperor and myself anymore, because even if I win, you'll just get hundreds and thousands or even millions of players to attack me. Forget about giving me the guild creation token. Ha 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 ha. Whoa, they really have no shame. If you can't afford to lose, then don't fight. TCH, Ling Tian, this time I support you. The Flame Emperor lost all his dignity in a second, and he was the one looking for it. Everyone could see that. There is no doubt about it, and now that he didn't win, they are trying to surround Ling Tian. Yan Huang Alliance, do you want to be disgraced completely? Ling Chen's taunts and what the surrounding crowd of players said made Long Tianyun's brow twist. He looked at Flame Shadow and said coldly, who let them come out? Tsang Yen died, they must have subconsciously rushed out, Flame Shadow said immediately. He did not give such an order. Of course, there was a possibility he didn't speak of, that it was an order given by Tsang Yen in anger after his death. Given his attitude, his smug provocation, and then being killed in 1 second, the moment of shame and humiliation was enough to make one explode with rage. Make them all stand down. Long Tian Yun bellowed. Yes, sir. Flame Shadow said accordingly. If this was because of a personal vendetta, it was over. With so many people witnessing it, the Flame Emperor would never regain his dignity after this, and this would cause severe damage to Yan Huang Alliance's reputation. He said in a low voice, that Tsang Yen, do not revive him. Is he not sufficiently disgraced? If he is revived, who knows what else he will do, Long Tian Yun said while waving his hand. Flame Shadow deeply agreed. He did not take out the revival scroll, and quickly instructed the group to disperse. Everyone leave. Who told you to come out? This was a fair fight, no one can be blamed for the death of the Flame Emperor. Flame Shadow took a few steps forward and exclaimed loudly. As Flame Shadow spoke, these originally restless players rapidly withdrew from the scene, leaving the center space open until soon. The only two remaining were Ling Tian and the Sword Emperor. Just now when the Flame Emperor died, my people of the Yan Huang Alliance got a little anxious, so they did something without thinking and made a fool of themselves. My Yan Huang Alliance always keeps to their commitments. We will not go back on them and will not use our power to bully others. Flame Shadow stood in the front, and said, can everyone please forget that ever happened? The main event for today was for the fight between Ling Tian and the Sword Emperor. I hope that these other things will not interrupt that. Ling Tian, if you are ready, you can begin. I have always been ready to begin, Ling Chen responded. He then put away his celestial equips and took out the common single-handed sword that he had revealed before. Be careful, Long Tian Yun said to the Sword Emperor in a low voice. The Sword Emperor didn't say a word. Before, Long Tian Yun had told him to end it quickly. But at this moment, he told him to be careful. Obviously, what Ling Tian did just then had struck fear into him. Before today, he, and everyone else had underestimated Ling Tian. Everyone thought that his strength came from his level and equipment, but this was not the case from what could be seen of his strength. Yet this did not strike fear into Long Tian Yun. He still had complete faith in the Sword Emperor's true strength. Just now when the Flame Emperor was killed in one shot, the quick movement, the rapid equipment switch, and the violent and relentless strike, the Flame Emperor was strong. Not only did he have a formidable fire that he could control, but he had combat consciousness that was far greater than that of any other person, and even he could not respond to Ling Tian's attack. This kind of attack that managed to catch the Flame Emperor completely off guard was something not ordinary people could do. Right now Long Tian Yun had already begun to regret accepting Ling Tian's challenge from yesterday. At the time, he was feeling violent anger and was unstable in his thinking. It really wasn't the best time to make decisions. When he calmed down, he regretted it a little bit, but that regret had immediately disappeared because he understood the strength of the Sword Emperor. Moreover, Ling Tian seemed untrained, so Long Tian Yun was unable to find a reason that the Sword Emperor would lose to him. But now Ling Tian, with the display of his real strength, was causing Long Tian Yun's initial regret to resurface, even though it was too late. He saw that Ling Tian was really strong, but it was not Ling Tian's strength that made him uneasy. Instead, it was that from yesterday till today, even under so much pressure, he always remained completely calm, with a collected posture. With such a mood, how could he be the impulsive and extremely arrogant person that others made him out to be? He said yesterday that this kind of person was either too smart or too stupid. The latter was now impossible, so it had to be the former. A person who was too smart decided to face Sword Emperor on his own initiative and with large stakes involved too. There was only really one possibility, and that was, he had absolute confidence. Hearing the almost invincible Skyfall release such words would have startled anyone, especially as he was ranked third. This Ling Tian is certainly full of mysteries. Everyone underestimated him. It looks like the arrogance and lack of restraint he demonstrated previously seemed to be intentional. Fighting the Sword Emperor was also with thorough preparation and purpose, and the usually astute Long Tian Yun has actually been led by the nose by him, Skyfall said softly as he looked at Ling Tian. This person must be of remarkable talent or a freak of nature. Long Tian Yun might be humiliated today. Are you saying Ling Tian can defeat the Sword Emperor? Against the Sky asked, surprised. At first, I didn't think he could, but now, the possibility really exists. Long Tian Yun himself is also somewhat flustered, Skyfall said with a laugh, his eyes lighting up as he waited to enjoy the sight. There was no doubt that the Sword Emperor was strong, but if Ling Tian actually defeated the Sword Emperor today, it would greatly frustrate the Yan-Huang alliance, and that was something he would be glad to see. The Sword Emperor is the strongest player in this generation. His sword technique is unparalleled in this world. You have fought him before, so you should have the clearest impression. What Ling Tian suddenly did before was surprising, but I still think he will not be able to defeat the Sword Emperor. However, what you said, boss, is correct. There is, at the very least, a possibility. It is not a situation where it is impossible, Against the Sky said. They were not the only ones sharing that thought. What all the players had anticipated to happen in this showdown had completely changed. Not only did he kill the fourth-ranked player, the Flame Emperor, in one blow, but he also dealt over 10,000 damage in one hit. If anyone had a chance of beating the Sword Emperor, it was Ling Tian, and if he truly did win, then he would become the new first-ranked player. But with the Sword Emperor's strength, could he really do it? Would Ling Tian really be capable of defeating the Sword Emperor? Whether Ling Tian can actually defeat the Flame Emperor is interesting, but what I am more interested in is that he killed the Flame Emperor in under a second. No matter what happens now, he has already thoroughly offended the entire Yan-Huang alliance, which means Tsang Yen, with his temperament, will have an undying, deep-to-the-bone, hatred for him. Except, when Ling Tian defeated Tsang Yen, it was clean and quick without hesitation. If he is not a stupid person, he too knows the consequences of that action. Thinking of what happened yesterday, he probably does not care that he has offended the Yan-Huang alliance. Maybe it was even intentional. This could turn out to be very interesting, Skyfall nodded meaningfully. Offending the Yan-Huang alliance was inevitable, but maybe we can attract him to our Skyfall dynasty. With his level, equipment, fame, as well as the fact that he killed the Flame Emperor in 1 second, it will give us a tremendous boost in strength. Against the Sky said. That is correct, Skyfall nodded, looking straight ahead at Ling Tian. He began contemplating how he could win him over to the Skyfall dynasty. The numerous players in and around the plains quietened down. At first almost everyone had thought that the Sword Emperor would win, but now the expectations had changed. The tension grew increasingly higher. It was the moment before the showdown between Ling Tian and the Sword Emperor. Big brother, good luck. Ling Shui-Ruo clasped both hands in front of her, her eyes sparkling as she anxiously looked at her brother. She believed that he would be able to succeed because in her heart, she knew that there was nothing her brother could not do. But even so, she was unable to control her anxiety, as he was about to face the best in China. Big brother Ling Tian, you must win. Even if it's the Sword Emperor, you have to win. Big brother Ling Tian, good luck. Hearing the nervous shouts of these girls, Mu Bingyao's eyebrows pricked slightly. The Sword Emperor will lose, she said without expression. The second region of the Plans district was completely filled with people, but at that moment, it was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Ling Tian and the Sword Emperor had been facing each other for a long time, but neither had made a move. The Sword Emperor was ranked first, so naturally, the Sword Emperor would not want to be the one attacking. But Ling Chen, full of pride, would not want to attack first either. I don't want to waste any time and I trust you feel the same. I made the challenge, so I will make the first move, Ling Chen said, lifting his sword slightly so that it was a sharp 45 degrees from the ground. A pleasant breeze blew by and the Sword Emperor's cape rippled. The Sword Emperor, who was stationary until this point, now moved like a strong wind. No, it should be compared to a storm, full of speed and strength, and just like when Ling Chen killed the Flame Emperor. Only a remnant of the Sword Emperor's silhouette was left as the Sword Emperor rushed towards Ling Chen. The Sword Emperor's wrist was wrapped in grey cloth and the Sword Emperor's hand made innumerable illusory swords with the sword as it was thrust towards Ling Chen's body. Ah! The crowd shouted out in surprise. The Sword Emperor's movement shocked the whole world. The Sword Emperor was formidable not only because of sword techniques, but also because of combat knowledge and explosive movements that were unparalleled in the world. Ling Chen couldn't focus on the numerous illusory swords that were heading towards his body. Even though the Sword Emperor was holding one sword, it was pointing in so many different directions and creating so many strong breezes in its wake that it was as if each of them were real swords and not just illusory afterimages. This was definitely not a technique in the Mystic Moon world but one that the Sword Emperor had developed individually. What went into the game world was not the player's body, but his consciousness. When an ordinary player entered the world, they fought with the skills of their profession and class. But, if one entered with real-world mastery of the sword, then when they were in the game world, they would still have mastery over the sword. The game could not remove the memory of a player, nor would it stop the player's ability to control the sword. The game couldn't make it forget the real-world sword techniques that the players knew. Taking Zhang Yan as an example, he had great control over the use of fire in the real world, and so when he entered the game world, his control of fire was of a superior level. The players whose skills were far beyond that of ordinary players did not exist without reason. With the Sword Emperor's first attack, the players could see that the illusory swords seemed to have blocked all of Ling Chen's escape routes. The Sword Emperor clearly only had one sword, but it was as if Ling Chen was being cut by innumerable swords. Those who saw the Sword Emperor attack for the first time let out a surprised cry, and in that moment they understood why the Sword Emperor was called the Sword Emperor. The Sword Emperor's attacks were capable of cutting his opponent to bits. It was like being attacked by more than 10 swords, 10 times, in an instant. Even the players with high levels of HP would be unable to withstand the attack and would be killed in an instant. Tian, who was already covered by the illusory swords, would die in an instant unless his defense and HP were high enough to withstand the Sword Emperor's strong 10 swords attacks. But within the illusory swords, the people noticed that Tian's body was in a trance. It was as if his body was placed in a light screen, fuzzy and immaterial. The swords were passing through him as he just stood there, no damage values appearing. It was just like he was nonchalantly floating. Then while still within the illusory swords, he suddenly lifted the silver sword in his hands, casting a Tian burst, which covered a 5m arc in front of him, towards the Sword Emperor. Tian burst's range was 5m and the speed in which he raised his hands was incomparably fast. There was no way that anyone would be able to dodge that. Just when his sword was about to hit the Sword Emperor, a ding sound that came to his ears. The Sword Emperor's illusory swords had disappeared and the silver-grade sword was pressed against Ling Chen's sword, preventing the skill from activating. Tian wrinkled his brow and added more pressure in his arm. The Sword Emperor pushed away, and moved backward so that the two separated. They looked at each other, silent. The whole plains were silent. The first time Tian and the Sword Emperor crossed swords, it left the whole crowd of players dumbfounded. Tian was perfectly fine and the Sword Emperor was perfectly fine. There was not yet a damage value to be seen. He was clearly within the illusory blades. How? Seeing Tian perfectly fine, Xiao Qiufeng whispered, unable to believe his own eyes. He understood clearly what the Sword Emperor's technique was capable of. "Hey, it's not just you." Yun Feng clasped his hands and his vision became fiery. When the illusory swords covered Ling Chen, his heart sank. But even within the illusory swords, Ling Chen had managed to not get hurt at all, which meant that none of the illusory swords touched his body, which was even more surprising. To his knowledge, the Sword Emperor could swing at 13 different angles in 1 second, so if you wanted to evade it you had to evade the sword's shapes entirely. Otherwise, if one were to use their sword, they would have to do so within 1 second in order to precisely match all the swings. This was not something a normal human could do. But Ling Tian didn't get hit once. The players who knew how scary the Sword Emperor truly was would find this the most shocking and wouldn't be able to believe it. This is impossible. Long Tian Yun was thoroughly surprised and his assistant, Flame Shadow, nearby was also thoroughly surprised. They were completely unable to believe that what happened just a moment ago was real. Under the whole heavens, there was only one person who could achieve that. That person was a player called True God, and would never be surpassed. Eve. This Ling Tian, could it be that his strength compared with Eve? No way, there was definitely no way. There could only be one with Eve's strength. How could someone possibly surpass the Sword Emperor to approach her strength? No way. As expected of the Sword Emperor, using a silver-grade sword to perform a parry, Ling Chen looked straight ahead at the Sword Emperor, seemingly wanting to look past the cloak to see the Sword Emperor's true appearance. In the game world, only weapons of celestial rank and above could have the chance of triggering a parry, but the Sword Emperor was able to create one with just a silver-grade sword in hand. The Sword Emperor's sword technique was truly terrifying. Even an ordinary sword could be used as a terrifying weapon in those hands. Just then, everyone saw the Sword Emperor come within close range of Ling Chen, and shot out countless illusory blades that completely covered Ling Tian. At that moment, everyone was sure that Ling Tian was dead, although the Sword Emperor's equipment were all very ordinary, but normal attacks could do around 300 damage, unless, of course, Ling Tian had unrealistically high defense. Attacking 10 or so times in just a split second, that would deal over 3,000 damage. Even if Ling Tian was covered in celestial-grade equipment, it was impossible for him, at his level, to have over 3,000 HP. However, he was not hit even a single time, and was even able to successfully counterattack, striking the Sword Emperor backwards. "I'm impossible." Long Tian Yun gnashed his teeth, repeating that word over and over again. Even with his mental fortitude, he was still shocked to the point of disbelief. The Sword Emperor was the strongest player in his Yan-Huang alliance, as well as the strongest player in China. The Sword Emperor was also his main bodyguard, who he had absolute faith in. However, the Sword Emperor's attack had been easily broken by the opponent. This was something that he simply could not believe, and did not want to accept. Flame Shadow could understand how Long Tian Yun was feeling. Seeing the person that he had absolute confidence in being forced backwards, it was something extremely unpleasant and worrying. Seeing Long Tian Yun's expression changing, he hurriedly said, "Young master. Don't worry, that was only the Sword Emperor's most basic attack. The Sword Emperor is unparalleled in China, so after he becomes serious, even 10 Ling Tians will not be able to defeat him. Please do not worry, young master." Flame Shadow's words caused Long Tian Yun to calm down slightly. Long Tian Yun frowned, and gripped his hands into fists. "You're right. Right now, the Sword Emperor might even be able to fight on even grounds with Eve. How could he lose to this Ling Tian? This time, it's my turn to attack." In the second bout of attacks, Ling Tian decided to take the initiative and attack first. However, his attacking style was completely different to that in the first bout of attacks. He held the sword in front of him, and slowly walked towards the Sword Emperor. His walking seemed extremely casual, as if he was taking a stroll, rather than fighting an extremely important match with an incredibly powerful player. However, in contrast, the Sword Emperor was not at all at ease. Instead, every time Ling Chen took a step closer, the Sword Emperor could feel an invisible pressure becoming greater. The Sword Emperor could almost see an incredibly venomous and dangerous snake slowly and stealthily creeping forwards, ready to strike out suddenly at any moment. Swoosh! Although movement speed was something players were limited by, explosive power and speed were not restricted at all. Usually, before most people ran at their full speed or released their full power, their feet would always have a slight preparation movement. However, Ling Chen didn't have one. He was like a gale that burst forth suddenly, charging towards the Sword Emperor. The pale white-grade sword in Ling Chen's hand was like the venomous fangs of a snake, piercing towards the Sword Emperor's head. Seeing such an explosive movement, without needing any preparation, the experts who were present were all shocked. With this sort of explosive speed, let alone in close quarters, but even if he was a mid-range distance away, his opponent still wouldn't be able to easily defend even if they were mentally prepared. This was the first time that Ling Chen had attacked first. His extremely ordinary sword actually brought pressure to the Sword Emperor. The Sword Emperor's mastery of the sword was at an incredibly high level, to the point that it was unnecessary to actually see the opponent's attack. After all, just based on the pressure from the opponent's sword, the Sword Emperor was able to immediately work out the trajectory of the sword. The Sword Emperor did not retreat, because with such explosive speed behind the attack, there was simply not enough time to move backwards. Moreover, the Sword Emperor's body was much slower than the sword, so although retreating was impossible, the Sword Emperor could still execute a perfect parry. With his sword pointing towards the Sword Emperor, Ling Chen's lightning-fast attack would cause most ordinary players to panic, and pray that their weapon would activate a parry. Nonetheless, when Ling Chen's sword was a mere 10 centimeters away from the Sword Emperor already prepared to parry it in the next instant. However, in that last moment, the Sword Emperor suddenly felt that the sword suddenly disappeared. The Sword Emperor immediately gripped down on the sword. Clang! Although Ling Chen's attack seemed to be aimed at the Sword Emperor's head, it was only a feint. His real target was the left side of the Sword Emperor's chest, but his sword was suddenly parried by the Sword Emperor. A look of shock flashed past on Ling Chen's face. The Sword Emperor could even parry this? The Sword Emperor's sword intent was indeed monstrous. To be able to cultivate such a sword intent, even if it was the Xianyuan family, it would take someone perhaps 60 or 70 years. To be precise, even if one began to train in the sword as soon as they were born, they would still have to be 60 or 70 to achieve this level of sword intent. However, the person in front of him didn't seem to be an elderly person, based from their movements and the aura they gave off. At most this person seemed around 40. To be able to achieve such a sword intent at the age of 40, this sort of talent could be described as a monstrous genius. In the way of the sword, it was incredibly difficult to train one's sword intent. This was because training sword intent was not just about training, but also about one's talent and comprehension. It was something that could only be developed over a long period of time. The more powerful one's sword intent was, the more skillful their execution of sword skills and techniques would be. To have such a cultivation at such a young age, was the reason this Sword Emperor is completely wrapped up to protect his identity? Ling Chen looked up at the place where his sword and the Sword Emperor's sword were locked together, and smiled. To be able to parry whenever one wanted, that was an incredible skill. As long as one could get the timing right, as well as block at the right place, one could parry any type of physical attack. With Ling Chen's skill, it wouldn't be too difficult for him to do such a thing. However, Ling Chen had not used this many times in the Mystic Moon world, especially not while fighting strong bosses. The reason was simple: just because one parried, that didn't mean the attack would be completely blocked. Rather, this was extremely dangerous. It would be possible for one to completely parry and block the attack from an opponent whose strength was similar, or weaker. However, if an opponent with strength much greater than the user attacked, if the user tried to parry, that would be courting death. The opponent's attack would easily break through or thrust aside the parry, resulting in the attack hitting the user. Ling Tian put most of his points in strength, and his War God technique also boosted his strength greatly. Thus, in terms of strength, the Sword Emperor definitely wasn't Ling Tian's match. Moreover, taking into account Ling Chen's explosive speed, the moment his attack was parried, Ling Chen continued to burst forwards. Just like he expected, the Sword Emperor's body was easily pushed back by him, causing the Sword Emperor to stumble backwards. Ling Chen continued to rush forwards, sending a Ling Tian burst towards the Sword Emperor. The players in the crowd let out gasps and cries of shock. Even Long Tian Yun involuntarily took a step forward. Ling Tian's attacks could deal over 10,000 damage if the Sword Emperor was hit, then the match would be immediately over. Clang! The sound of metal clashing once again sounded out. The Sword Emperor's sword, as if it had a life of its own, once again parried Ling Chen's attack. Immediately after, the Sword Emperor's wrist flicked, pushing Ling Chen's sword aside, and rushed towards Ling Chen with the sword pointing towards Ling Chen's chest. Being able to parry even while off balance, and immediately counterattacking afterwards, Ling Chen simply could not look down on this Sword Emperor. The sword in the Sword Emperor's hand came closer and closer, but this time, there was only the single sword, and no illusory swords. However, as the sword drew nearer to Ling Chen's body, everyone's eyes widened, because the straight sword suddenly bent and curved. The sword was clearly heading towards his chest, and yet the sense of danger came from the right. In the next moment, the sword seemed to bend and attack from the left, right and center. Ling Chen frowned, and retreated, then suddenly leaned backwards. 3 gusts of wind passed over him. Ling Chen then immediately shot forwards, barraging into the Sword Emperor's chest. With the sword piercing over Ling Chen's head, there was no way for the Sword Emperor to dodge Ling Chen, who charged like a meteor. Ling Chen's left elbow struck the right side of the Sword Emperor's chest, making the Sword Emperor lose balance. Immediately, Ling Chen also cast a Ling Tian burst. Bang! -1260. After being elbowed and hit by a Ling Tian burst, the Sword Emperor was knocked back by 10 steps and fell down. Because Ling Chen was only using a pale white grade sword, his Ling Tian burst only dealt 1260 damage, leaving the Sword Emperor with just a sliver of HP. Whoosh! The Sword Emperor falling to the ground and almost being insta-killed caused all of the spectating players to call out in shock and dismay. Long Tian Yun staggered, and felt as if he was going to vomit blood. Flame Shadow quickly rushed over and supported Long Tian Yun's body. Young master. The Sword Emperor hasn't used his full strength yet, please do not worry. He will definitely defeat Ling Tian. The one to fall was actually, the Sword Emperor. Ling Tian really does have the power to defeat the Sword Emperor. I couldn't even see what he did clearly. My goodness, is this really a game? Why does it seem like a scene from an action movie? I can't believe it. Is the Sword Emperor's legend going to be dispelled? What sort of person is this Ling Tian? Damn! Who was it that bet with me that the Sword Emperor would destroy Ling Tian in 5 seconds? Come out. The development of the battle was out of everyone's expectations. They had only exchanged a few blows, but it was already obvious who had the upper hand. It was Sword Emperor, who had fallen. Although the Sword Emperor was still alive, anyone could see the difference in strength, and it wasn't a small either. Yeah. Within the small house in the Azure Dragon City, the girls cheered wildly. Cool breeze caressing the ridge of the Xianyuan family's 36 sword techniques. It seems that you are indeed from the Xianyuan family. Facing the Sword Emperor, Ling Chen spoke in a low voice that only the Sword Emperor could hear. Suddenly, Ling Chen's expression changed, and said in a shocked voice that only audible by the Sword Emperor, "You're a woman." Although Ling Chen blurted out these words, he said them in a low voice, so that only the Sword Emperor heard. As this sentence came out of his mouth, a wave of shock passed through his heart. As he struck the right side of the Sword Emperor's chest, his elbow felt something that was curved and soft. For males, if they had strong pectoral muscles, it would instead feel solid and thick. However, what he touched was a softness and roundness that only women had. Ling Chen was almost certain that this Sword Emperor was actually a woman. Come to think of it, it was impossible for anyone to know Sword Emperor's actual gender. After all, the Sword Emperor was always wrapped in a cloak, and did not reveal anything. The Sword Emperor never spoke either, thus, no one knew that the Sword Emperor was actually a woman. Moreover, even if he said it out loud, no one would believe that the almighty Sword Emperor was a woman. Ling Chen's lips slightly curved upwards into a smirk. He was sure that in order to gain this level of skill, this person had to be at least 40 or 50 years old. It was unfortunate that the breasts he had just touched belonged to a 40 or 50-year-old woman, rather than a young lady. However, a woman possessing such sword intent at such an age caused one to marvel. Originally, after knocking down the Sword Emperor, Ling Chen had the chance to immediately finish her off and conclude the duel. However, finding out that the Sword Emperor was a woman caused him to pause in shock, which resulted in him losing his chance. At this moment, the Sword Emperor slowly stood up. A cold killing intent radiated out from her body, causing the surrounding temperature to drop. The people in the crowd nearby all fell silent, and the players who were especially close began to shiver. Ling Chen frowned. He was much too familiar with killing intent. This Sword Emperor's killing intent was extremely strong and heavy. The killing intent radiating out from the Sword Emperor was so thick that those around her felt that there were countless sharp swords stabbing into their faces. For the players who had only read about killing intent in novels and manga, this was the first time they had truly known what it was. Young master, the Sword Emperor has gotten angry, such a strong killing intent. Ling Chen is doomed for sure. Flame Shadow quickly said to Long Tian Yun. Long Tian Yun's gaze was dark and cold, and he stared at Ling Chen and the Sword Emperor. He would not allow the Sword Emperor to lose. There was nothing he wanted more than for the Sword Emperor to instantly destroy Ling Tian. Everyone present could feel the Sword Emperor's killing intent and anger. However, they all believed that this was because the Sword Emperor had been knocked down by Ling Tian, whereas only Ling Chen knew the true reason, because he had touched her chest. In the virtual world, there was a penalty setting for sexually assaulting females. If a male player touched a private part of a female's body without her permission, the female player could use the system to punish the offender with lightning from the heavens. The degree of the punishment would differ according to how serious the offense was. Just then, he had touched a private part on the Sword Emperor's body, which allowed her to use the lightning punishment on him. However, she did not do this. After all, this would be like telling the whole world that she was actually a woman. Things are getting interesting. The one who is clearly superior is actually Ling Tian. Within the crowd, Against the Sky said in shock. Long Tian Yun's emotions must be quite interesting right now. This Ling Tian, his background definitely isn't ordinary. Even the Xianyuan family's Sword Emperor can't do anything to him. He's simply a monster. Skyfall's words were incredibly accurate and pertinent. This is the first time I've seen or heard about the Sword Emperor getting angry. It almost doesn't seem right. Wasn't it said that the Sword Emperor already cut off all emotions? Back when the Sword Emperor was defeated by Eve, he didn't have any reaction at all. Against the Sky pondered out loud. This isn't important, let's just continue watching this entertaining performance. Everyone had things that they were especially mindful or defensive about. This was especially so for women and their private parts. From the Sword Emperor's reaction, she was as defensive as other women in this respect, no, perhaps even more defensive. This sort of killing intent and hatred radiating out from her was similar to that of an irreconcilable hatred. Didn't I just accidentally touch your chest? Why is such an old lady getting so worked up over that? Could she be an old virgin or something? AI, you don't have to get so worked up over it. I didn't know you were a woman, and I didn't do it on purpose. Alright, I'll definitely keep this a secret. Ling Chen helplessly said in a low voice that only the Sword Emperor could hear. The Sword Emperor's response was her blade coming towards him, filled with boundless killing intent. Ling Chen's body moved back and forth as he dodged all 7 of the illusory blades. He continued to speak, the Xian Yuan family's 36 sword techniques are indeed quite powerful. Forget it, since I don't know you, I can't just take advantage of you like that. In return, I'll let you use 30 moves against me without retaliation. Swish. Whoosh. As the Sword Emperor's sword slashed and pierced through the air, it created tearing sounds. It was obvious how devastating her attacks were. Ling Chen withdrew his sword, and directed all of his focus onto the Sword Emperor's sword. As he retreated backwards, he dodged the Sword Emperor's first strike, and muttered, splitting clouds, revealing Sunday. As the Sword Emperor's third attack came towards him, the blade split into 2 illusory blades, then 4, then 8. Ling Chen's eyes narrowed, and his body rapidly swung back and forth from left to right, causing all of the illusory blades to miss him. 4 words came out of his mouth, heaven and earth strike. All of the words that came out of his mouth were the names of the techniques the Sword Emperor was using. The Sword Emperor continuously moved, furiously striking towards Ling Chen. Sometimes the strikes came from the left, sometimes they came from the right, sometimes from above, sometimes from below, sometimes twisting, sometimes illusory, sometimes even disappearing. Every technique that the Sword Emperor used was vastly different to other ones, there was no repetition in her attack pattern. This caused the spectating players to watch with their mouths hanging open. What was even more shocking was that the Sword Emperor's target, Tian, had not been hit a single time. He had been evading the entire time, sometimes to the left, sometimes to the right, sometimes retreating, and sometimes even advancing. If one had to describe him, it would have to be like a ghost or a specter. No one could clearly see his movements. Sometimes it seemed that he was standing still, and yet the sword was still not able to touch his body. Moreover, no one knew that every time the Sword Emperor used a technique, he would call out its name. Soaring snow like rainbows. Boundless heavens and earth. Turning clouds, rippling wind. Big Dipper chaotic dance. Rolling clouds, flowing waters. Ling Chen continuously dodged the Sword Emperor's 30 strikes, and did not retaliate at all. Instead, all he did was yell out 30 technique names, he did not miss even a single one. No one could see the shock in the Sword Emperor's heart. The feeling that Ling Chen gave the Sword Emperor was the same as that which Eve gave her. Back when Eve had defeated her, it was like she already knew how she would attack. She would never forget the feeling of being attacked by Eve. Not only did it seem like she could predict how and where the Sword Emperor would attack, but could also seemingly tell where she would retreat. No matter how the Sword Emperor dodged, Eve's attacks always found their mark on her body. The Ling Tian in front of her was similar to that Eve. I said that I'd give you a handicap of 30 moves, and now that's complete, so I don't owe you anything. Now, it's my turn to attack. After calling out in a low voice, Ling Chen's semi-closed eyes suddenly flew open, and the pale white-grade sword in his hand flat stabbed towards the Sword Emperor. Clang! The Sword Emperor twirled her sword, and swept aside Ling Chen's strike. Ling Chen laughed, and he flicked his right wrist, smashing a Ling Tian burst diagonally towards the Sword Emperor. He believed that with the Ling Tian burst's power, even if the Sword Emperor blocked it, she would be blasted back. However, the block that he had expected did not come. The Sword Emperor jumped high above this diagonal strike. She didn't just jump up, but also flipped and turned a few times. As she spun, the sword in her hands also struck out numerous times, creating many illusory blades. In the lighting, it looked as if there were countless stars and meteors around her body, giving the entire scene a dreamlike appearance. To the spectators, it looked as if there was a meteor piercing towards Ling Chen's chest. The Sword Emperor's sword intent had been gathered into an attack which focused on a single point. If it hit, it would unleash devastating damage. Faced with such a scene, it would be incredibly hard to dodge. As for Ling Chen with his monstrous spirit power, how could he not be able to dodge this sort of attack? However, just as the Sword Emperor was still spinning in the air with the meteor-like illusory swords around her, Ling Chen was so shocked that he felt as if he had been struck by lightning, and his body stiffened, and a ringing sound appeared in his head. Whish! The swift and sharp blade pierced through the air, and brushed past Ling Chen's body. Ling Chen had used all of his strength to desperately twist to the side to avoid the Sword Emperor's attack. Otherwise, with his not-so-outstanding HP, it was possible that he could have been instantly killed. However, this desperate dodge was not executed with the earlier precision and calmness. He had taken 3 steps back before he recovered his balance again. Ling Chen raised his head, and looked at the Sword Emperor. If he took off his mask, everyone would clearly see that his eyes were shaking, and even his hands were slightly trembling. The Sword Emperor did not continue to attack, and stood still, coldly staring at him. After those 30 moves, her anger had more or less dissipated. Just then when she had attacked, she could also feel that Ling Chen had slightly spaced out, and thus was nearly hit by her. She could also tell that his breathing had become irregular. Ling Chen's throat was dry as he faced the Sword Emperor. His calm heart had been thrown into chaos, and his heart was furiously thumping. It was as if there were giant waves crashing about in his mind. You are, he said a few vague words, but the words he truly wanted to say did not come out. He also knew the name of the technique that the Sword Emperor had just used. This technique was created by 2 people, and only one person knew how to use it. To be attacked by the Sword Emperor at close range meant certain death. This was common knowledge to all Chinese players. However, the Sword Emperor had attacked Ling Tian 30 times, but he had not taken any damage at all. He had actually put away his weapons, and casually dodged the attacks with his hands behind his back. Evidently, he was allowing the Sword Emperor strike out at him without retaliating. He didn't take the Sword Emperor seriously at all. In fact, it seemed like he was just playing around with the Sword Emperor. The Yan Huang Alliance players all began to tremble. Their pride, their god, was like nothing to this Ling Tian. Even when attacking at close range, the Sword Emperor was powerless against Ling Tian. No, it wasn't because the Sword Emperor was weak, but because of how monstrous Ling Tian was. Long Tian Yun's face was now twisted in anger, and Flame Shadow by his side was sweating profusely. Zhang Yan, who had been instantly killed by Ling Tian, had revived at the Azure Dragon City, and was so furious that he couldn't make a sound. Before today, who would have thought that this battle wasn't the Sword Emperor bullying Ling Tian, but rather Ling Tian controlling everything? Ling Tian, what sort of deity was he? This thought passed through every spectator's mind. It's difficult to believe that this person can only be described as a monsters. Not only can he suppress the Sword Emperor, but he can even play around at the same time. Perhaps he's even at the same level as Eve. Xiao Qiufeng said in awe. Beside him, Yun Feng's mouth curved up into a smile. This wasn't just, perhaps this was a fact. Back then, he had personally seen Ling Tian face off against Eve on equal grounds. He frowned, and said in a low voice, however, it was pretty weird just then, although Ling Tian was able to dodge multiple illusory blades at the same time, there was only one in that last attack, but it seemed that he spaced out at that moment. What happened? Did he realize something? Xiao Qiufeng, Azure Dragon City, within Heart's Dream small house, big brother Ling Tian is so awesome. He's so cool, wow. Even if it was someone who had never stepped into the virtual world before, they would still know that Ling Tian was completely in control of this battle. The strongest player in China was being completely suppressed by Ling Tian, who was their fellow guildmate in Heart's Dream. They all felt extremely honored and glorified, and they as excited as defeating the Sword Emperor themselves. In this small room, the girls cheered unceasingly. There were great waves crashing within Yunmeng Xian's heart. Big Brother had found such a person to help her, it was simply inconceivable and unbelievable. From how things looked, it seemed that it would be incredibly easy for him to defeat the Sword Emperor. It wouldn't even take him much time or effort. From today onwards, his name would travel throughout the entire China, and the entire world. Once Heart's Dream was officially established, with him as a member, their fame would also spread throughout the entirety of China in a single night. At that time, Heart's Dream's fame and reputation would be comparable to that of the Yun family financial groups. As for gold, yesterday, Ling Tian had all of a sudden given her 900 million gold. Moreover, he gave it to her so easily, so casually, indeed, at that level, it would be incredibly easy for him to earn money. In that case, amassing a wealth that rivaled the Yun family financial groups within 2 years was no longer impossible. Because of him, the seemingly distant and impossible dream was starting to become a reality. Ling Tian, unconsciously, Yunmeng Xian gently said this name. All of the girls were wildly cheering, except Mu Bingyao. The Sword Emperor's last strike had been barely dodged by Ling Tian, which was incomprehensible to her. Even if that attack was twice as fast, Ling Tian would still be able to easily dodge it. So what happened just then? What had happened to cause him to lose focus to such an extent? You are, Ling Chen's heart trembled, and his body shook. His mind was filled with countless memories of scenes and voices that caused his emotions to run amok. Big Brother Tianya, let's give this sword technique we made together a name. What should we call it? Right, let's call it, Heaven's Edge, Butterfly's Dance, Tianya Jia Wu, what do you think? Heaven's Edge, Butterfly's Dance, ha! What a beautiful name. Heaven's Edge. Butterfly's Dance. No. Impossible. Impossible. She definitely already. What are the results? Have you found any information about her? Where is she? How is she? Master, please, you have to remain calm. What are you saying? Did something happen to her? Tell me. Yes. Master, the information we found out about her was, within the Xian Yuan family, there's no longer a person called Xian Yuan Jia Wu. 7 years ago, she already, fasted to death. TLN, as in died from refusing to eat, no, impossible. It's definitely not true. It's definitely not true. Master, I'm sorry, but 7 years ago, Xian Yuan Jia Wu already, shut up. I don't believe it. Ling Chen's breathing became incredibly heavy and ragged, and his vision became distorted. Right now, if the Sword Emperor attacked, he definitely would not be able to dodge. Heaven's Edge, Butterfly's Dance. Tianya and Jia Wu. Ling Chen raised his head, and rested his gaze on the Sword Emperor, unable to move at all. The Sword Emperor had covered every inch of her body so that nothing could be seen. Her appearance, eyes, hair, everything was completely hidden. The Sword Emperor never spoke, and did not make any noise. No one had ever heard her speak before. Ling Chen's heart ached as if someone had shot an arrow through it. Jia, I beg you, leave me. Get away from me as far as you can, otherwise, you'll die as well. I don't want to. I trained so hard with my sword so I can protect you. I don't want you to die. If you're really going to die, then let me die with you. I'm not afraid of dying, I'm only afraid that you'll leave me alone. Big Brother Tianya, please don't chase me away, don't, woo. Jia, I don't want to die. I really don't want to die. If I die, I'll never be able to see your eyes. I'll never be able to hear your voice again. Dyar. Big brother Tianya, you're a man, so you can't cry, we all can't cry, nothing's going to happen to you, no matter what happens, I'll stay with you, my everything belongs to my Tianya. If big brother Tianya really died, I will also die, no one will ever see my eyes again, no one will ever hear my voice. No one will ever see my eyes again, no one will ever hear my voice, ding. The sword in Ling Chen's hand fell to the ground with a gentle ding. Sword Emperor. At this moment, every player saw that there was something wrong with Ling Tian. They all began to quietly discuss among themselves. Ling Chen raised his head to the sky, and gently let out a breath. Time to finish this. He dropped his head down, and his eyes became peaceful again. He only said 4 emotionless words to the Sword Emperor. Clang! He did not pick up the sword he dropped on the ground. Rather, 1 gray and 1 green light appeared respectively in his left and right hands, they were the Great Ravager and Zephyr Blade. As soon as these 2 weapons appeared, the crowd began to go crazy. Before, Ling Chen had been suppressing the Sword Emperor with just a single pale white grade sword. Now, he had taken out his 2 strongest weapons. Could it be that he wanted to finish this quickly? Indeed, it was so. He tightly gripped the Great Ravager and Zephyr Blade, and charged towards the Sword Emperor. However, he did not swing his weapons at all, but rather simply charged incredibly quickly towards the Sword Emperor. The Sword Emperor flicked her wrist, and sent a wave of illusory swords towards Ling Chen. Ling Chen's hands finally started to move. He swung the Great Ravager out, not towards the Sword Emperor's body, but towards the illusory swords. Bang! The Sword Emperor's illusory swords were incredibly fast, and it was extremely difficult to defend against such an attack. However, Ling Chen's Great Ravager had solidly blocked the attack, moreover, blocking it was not the end. The Great Ravager's special attribute was that if he parried an attack or if his attack was parried, there was a certain chance to knock the opponent's weapon flying. It did not specify what the chance was, but it was made clear that the greater the difference between Ling Chen's and his opponent's strength, the greater the chance of the special attribute triggering. Under Ling Chen's full-strength swing, as well as the Great Ravager's incredible weight, the force slammed into the Sword Emperor's hand, causing her body to be knocked back and her sword was sent flying into the distance. The crowd of spectators yelled out in shock. The Sword Emperor's lost balance, but Ling Chen did not stop, and instead slashed towards the Sword Emperor's chest with the Zephyr Blade. Ling Chen was able to wield both weapons effectively at the same time without disrupting either hand. After the Great Ravager in his right hand had knocked the Sword Emperor's weapon flying and caused her to lose balance, his left hand immediately followed through with the Zephyr Blade. Even if she was a god, she would not be able to dodge this second strike. Whoosh! When wielded, the Zephyr Blade carried a breeze with it. The green arc flashed towards the Sword Emperor's body, however, just as it was about to cut into her, it suddenly stopped. Time had stopped. Clang! The Sword Emperor's sword fell down from the sky, and smashed into the ground. However, no one took any notice of the sword, but rather stared dumbfounded at Ling Chen and the Sword Emperor, who both stood unmovingly, as well as the Zephyr Blade that was millimeters away from the Sword Emperor. Just then, if I went a bit further, you'd be dead, Ling Chen said, so, you've lost.